All right, we're live. Do you have your tea?
I do, but funny enough, when I was sorting out my mic, my tea has got cold. So
Oh, well, I drink my tea kind of, I'd say it's usually in the luke cold range,
this is
kind
this
of
is
room temperature cold.
this is like just below saliva temperature.
Okay. Nice. Yeah, like a solid 35 degrees centigrade.
Exactly. Anyways, nice to see you after a year.
Yeah, man, it's been a long time.
I think it was March. March was the last one that was done.
Was that the ketogenic diet? Is that the last one we did?
I'm not actually sure. I didn't even do my homework on that.
It's hard to keep track when they're a year apart, the episodes.
And it's true.
I feel like I wrote some article. I feel like whenever I wrote that ketosis biochem primer, that was sometime over the summer. So I want to say that was the last one. But I could just
I think I did
pretty fast.
No, it was fat loss. That was a fat loss one we did.
Fat loss. Okay.
That was what date was that? Oh, I didn't even date it. But anyway, I'm glad to see that you kept your hair. It's
I don't think it's ever going away.
Samson-esque now.
It's pretty long. Yeah.
It's crazy. It's awesome.
Yeah. I like it. I don't know. I thought maybe like when I start having to tie it up all the time, for working in a hospital, that it would get annoying and maybe I'd just be like, all right, I'm just going to cut it off because I can cut it off. There's no social weirdness about a guy with short hair. But I like it and I don't mind putting it in a bun working in the hospital. And yeah, I just enjoy my long hair. I don't know if I'll ever cut it unless I start going bald.
No. Well, don't encourage that.
Hasn't happened yet. So
yes. Yeah. Well, some of us are struggling with that one. Anyway, welcome everybody who's listening to the long-awaited ClimbSci podcast, episode 12. So in the previous episode, no. So maybe I've got my stopwatch running here, and I thought that what we'll do is I'll make it exactly like 20 minutes or something at the front of this podcast, so that people can jump ahead if they don't want to hear us do a catch up. But frankly, it would be good to hear what I'm sure other people would like to understand. What the hell have you been up to, Brian?
Oh man, well, I was doing a bunch of prereqs. After the whole cancer thing I went through, I just kind of wanted to change direction in my life a little bit. So I did a bunch of prereqs with the idea of going back to nursing school. Going to nursing school. I'm not returning to it, but beginning that. And so that's what I've been doing. I just started in January. It's a year-long accelerated program. And then
so you the stuff you were doing before was this pre to get.
They were just like random prereqs that I did not, it's nutrition. Of course, is a science and has its own science background, but there's a lot of things that we as nutritionists don't ever have to worry about. Like anatomy and physiology outside of the digestive system. Although that being said, like I've been amazed with how far the physiology from like when you learn about nutrition, like it goes all over the body. Especially with sports nutrition, we're dealing with muscles and with the heart and the lungs and everything. So it's stretched a really long way. The physiology that I picked up during my nutrition education.
Yeah, and you said in the email that this has really just actually helped you a lot. I mean, in terms of your background.
Yeah, that's it. That's what it feels like. None of the physiology or the pathophysiology has felt particularly hard. I mean, it's different. It's a different way of looking at things, but it feels good. It's nice to get a different perspective on things. Also, approach things from a different angle. So. It's been helpful. Even like there's some feedback too towards nutrition where I can kind of look at things and be like, okay, well that's another way to maybe to approach the situation, or, just dealing with a different population. Also, I've worked with athletes for so long and they're healthy by and large. So now working with a sick population where just what you're expecting is different. What baseline you're trying to return to is different. So it's been good.
Cool.
And I feel like you've had a much bigger transition than I have. I mean, I just kind of went back to school while I'm doing the same thing. And, I'm kind of migrating into a new part of my career, but you, changed things up completely.
Yeah, the fruits of which I'm still waiting to see. But so a lot of people realize that obviously I'm not in the big IT office. In this, if you're watching the video,
I know it's so well lit where you are.
I've actually got my I can't show it, but I've actually got my SAD light blasting because the light above. I even have a white pillowcase to soften the glow. Nice. Because the problem is the one above me is this like really orangey.
Okay.
And it reflects off my forehead, so it looks.
Yeah, I forget that I don't really forget that you're over in London. But it did occur to me just a moment ago that it probably isn't actually, that's not daylight shining on you.
Oh,
daylight's shining on me.
I should have gone with that. It's the window outside. Anyway, we're rambling. So yes, I left. I approached my IT company. So I was working. I had Fridays off for about a year. And was pottering around doing the nutrition coaching and things. And my boss was amazing about it. He just was like, as long as you get the work done, you can do bits and pieces. And then I approached the company and said, could I do a 2-day week? Which is, I wasn't expecting much. And, but I was like, I was might have try. I'm not going to lose anything. Yeah. So they went away and they actually said yes, first of all, and said, okay, that's fine. And then they came back and said, no, that's like, we're not going to be able to hire anybody for 2 days a week. But what we will do is if you leave, we'll give you, which was basically a kind of very diluted redundancy package. And I was absolutely blown away because they basically made sure that this wasn't a redundancy, but they were like, we know what you want to do and we like you and you've been with us for ages. So we want you to do your best. So I basically went away with enough money to basically pay my rent for, until the end of the year. That was last year. And I started Useful Coach full time in September. And I basically took a month break and then just got really stuck into doing stuff. And that's where I am now. And I'm taking on more full-time clients than I have been before. Before I was doing like 2 or 3 people a month. Now I'm pushing that to try and do, 3 people per month minimum every month. And I'm slowly building up. So it's super fun because it's like all the work that I was squeezing in around my IT job, I've now been able to actually just do in my time, full time. Strangely enough, I have far more work now. It's like you increase the size of your box and everything fits in the box. So, it's super rewarding. I love it. I absolutely love the freelance thing. It's an interesting transition. So I went from a salary. So 2 days ago, it was my payroll. So I work I have a limited company and I ran my payroll and I gave myself a salary of £250. All right. So, nice. That's £250 less than last month. But this was a rookie a limited company payroll mistake because I realized that clients pay me at a certain time and I had done payroll before clients had actually paid me for next month. So it's all a bit of a mess, but it's all right. Yeah. My credit card's going to suffice. And it's a great, this sort of things has growing pains, but I love it. And my Instagram has been kind of the primary thing where I've been putting a lot of bits and pieces and things like that. So it's super fun. But this really is the primary reason why we haven't done a podcast in so long is it's just really time. It's just been time and really the energy to put it together. you know, it may look like it's just slapdash, which it is, you know.
But slapping and dashing are both very energy intensive.
Exactly.
I don't know, you know, when the last time people have dashed and then slapped something, but it's not as easy as it looks.
No, not at all, not at all. So so really it's just been put on the back burner until now. I'm not sure why it's now, but this seems like a good enough time.
Yeah, I mean, we finally were able to sync our schedules together, and I mean, God willing, moving into the future, we can record another episode before March next year.
Yes, good. I'm glad you did. I'm not making any promises that we're going to do one next month. Honestly,
no,
folks.
I'm not either.
It's really,
yeah.
Unless there's somebody who wants to fling us £1,000 a month, then I will certainly do the work to put this podcast out. You know, but it's yeah, and I think, you know, what's been really lovely about this actually is the amount of emails that we have got just from people who have picked up the podcast and have made changes in their lives.
Yeah.
That I to be honest, it's I would say maybe 2 a month I get, either as a PM on Instagram or Facebook, or, you know, just an email saying, you know, I've done this, I've incorporated more carbohydrate, I've, you know, put in protein, and I'm just doing so well, and I'm feeling better. And these are some of them are fairly, you know, veteran climbers as well. Mm-hmm. And it's, I think, you know what, that's been the most rewarding thing, is that we put together this kind of body of work, and we knew we've done it well in terms of the content. The, you know, format is to be desired, but, you know, I think it's just been good, because it seems to be, you know, every now and then I'll see somebody on Facebook, you know, link to it, or say, oh, you should go to here, or, you know, even on Reddit, surprisingly, we don't have any really bad stuff. I don't go looking. But
yeah, I wouldn't. I mean, I haven't either.
No. But I mean, it's been positive. So I really thank you. I haven't actually looked at the stats of how many listeners we've had or downloads or anything, but overall, it's been really, really positive, and I'm so happy that it's been a resource for everybody, and and you have got something out of it. Yeah, long may it last.
Yeah.
So good.
Yeah, it is kind of amazing. I hear from people all the time as well. People, like, even though I've been pretty slow with writing on my blog, and then obviously with it's been a year since our last episode here, I still get regular questions, regular people writing in, asking when the next episode will be.
Yeah, who knows? Maybe it will be. I mean, you know, it's really just the amount of time, and then when we do have time, sometimes you'll just want to go see a movie on your night off, you know, or, like, you know, and I think that's the biggest thing, is that we do this in our free time, and now free time appears to be even less than what we had before. So if it comes, it comes.
Yep.
So, but tonight, what we do have is we basically asked for some questions from people, and yeah, we're going to run through them. Did you have the page that I separated stuff, or
yep,
do you have?
I do. I've got it open right now. I don't see you in it right now.
Oh no, I did another version with my own comments.
Another version, okay. All right. Well, as long as it's in the same order.
It is the same order, with the protein and all that bits of things.
Protein / general first.
Yeah, that's all. All of that is the same. I've just put my own notes in. Okay. And yeah, like as always, we don't have a plan.
Yeah, well, I mean, we do have a plan. We got questions. We got a lot of questions, and I think our intent is to answer all of them.
Yes.
We wrote it down. We're going to at least provide some sort of answer to it. It'll probably be a long answer or long episode. Not all the answers will be long, I'm sure, but many of them, I'm also certain, will be quite long. But you know, like there's a lot of questions. It looks like about 3 full pages of questions, and you know, like, I mean, we first announced this episode not a year ago, but probably 8 months ago, and then just kept getting tied up. So there's quite a few questions that we now have, and I'm
Right.
looking forward to this. I mean, we have a lot of really interesting ones. So
yeah, and I've got there's some other stuff. But yeah, let us start. Let us cease this rambling.
Let's
and
jump
let us
in.
Jump in. Okay, so shall I read the first one?
Sure.
Yeah, so this is from Andy Large, and it says, I think this might have been on Instagram. I'm not sure. But it says, "Hi, Tom. Having listened to your podcast on protein, I understand that there are other requirements for protein/protein synthesis than just for muscle maintenance or muscle growth. But I still wonder whether the grams per kilo of body weight protein relationship should more accurately be based on lean body mass rather than total body weight. Is that fair? Is that use of total mass just used as a good rule of thumb, as working out body weight is easier than accurately calculating total lean body weight? Cheers." So, do you want to kick it off?
Sure. I think if we're going to be, well, first, my own disclaimer is I really like, when I tell people to consume protein, I'm looking at more of what we have seen in the studies, which is that 20-gram bolus of protein is what's effective. And there was even a study a couple of years ago that compared like between people of a build more like Tom and I to, bodybuilders who were probably a lot heavier than, or definitely were, I don't know how much Tom weighs, but definitely heavier than I am. And compared like a 20-gram versus 40-gram bolus, and they still found that 20 grams is really what you need to get maximal muscle protein synthesis. And there was, some benefits of 40, but they weren't really, there wasn't anything exceptional compared to the 20. So like, yeah, if we're looking with all the other macronutrients, if you can calculate lean body mass, that probably is going to be a more accurate way to go about how much you actually need energy-wise. But when we're looking at protein, like you should be getting at least 20 grams in a meal. There's probably not a large benefit to getting more than 40. This is an age-dependent thing. So if you're older and you haven't been working out for a while, you're going to need more. But if you happen to be like a 300-pound all muscle human, which probably nobody listening to this podcast is, but if you happen to be, it doesn't mean that you need, 50 grams of protein minimum per meal. You still need kind of that minimum that we talked about, and you're probably still not going to get much benefit from more than that. So I really shy away from the grams per kilogram model. I think it's overly complicated for most people. And doesn't really have benefits compared to just making sure that all your meals, when you have them, have at least 20 grams of high quality protein.
Yeah, I think, a lot of times, if you've been in nutrition for a while, there's this interesting balance between the research numbers and recommendations and actual practice. Not that they're exclusive, but it's more that the fact that when you actually translate what is coming out of the research into the real world, you're not really so concerned with such specific numbers because it doesn't really relate like that. And if you listen to the protein episode, as Brian says, this kind of minimum 20 grams is for that leucine threshold. I won't explain it here. Go back to the first podcast. So what basically I do is I will meet the general recommendations. So from 1.8 grams per kilo upwards, and look at how that fits in with those, with dividing that up across the day for the person, right? So at the end of the day, I work with the total body weight number, and I normally do that either like retrospectively looking at their food journal. So I'll look at someone's food journal and see where they sit. And if it ends up being, say, quite low, let's say 1.6 or something for their total body mass, then I will immediately scale it up to between 1.8 and maybe 2.2 grams per kilo to see where that fits in, and then give it to the client as an application and then see where they sit. If they struggle to, and this actually normally happens, is that they struggle to have a lower number. It's like their default habits will shift them up. And what I'll do is I will then say, okay, well, we'll just make your habits end up being, let's say, two kilos per kilogram. And so the actual practice of it is quite different than just trying to figure out the optimal number. However, I said that to answer the question directly, on the ClimbSci notes, I'll put a paper that was done in 2016, where Geisler talked about the inadequacy of body weight recommendations for individual protein intake. But if you read the paper, because it's open access, is that the breadth of the subjects are going from obese to people with cancer, sarcopenia, the elderly. And what he was looking at was saying, well, if we just use a direct number, which was like the RDA of 0.8 grams per kilo, then this is going to be wildly variable if you're giving that to an obese person versus somebody who is recovering from cancer, right? Mm-hmm. And so that was his whole point of the paper, was to say, well, in this case, we'd have to basically scale up on lean body mass. And it ended up to be about 1.6 grams per kilogram of lean body mass, which I did a rough calculation. And for 80 kilo male at 15% body fat is about 1.4 grams per kilo total body mass, right? Mm-hmm. So it sits in there anyway. But to answer the direct question is that, yes, if we were to try and make it really specific, then you would want to calculate it by lean body mass. But the difference is that there is almost no need, because at the end of the day, really what you're looking at is to try and get these meals of 20 grams, and depending on the size of the person and the activity, they're going to be between maybe 4 and 5 meals. And if you're, because the primary audience for this podcast is climbers, most people are going to be in a body fat range that is not going to throw protein wildly out if we did it by total body weight. Even if we're working with a climber, let's say, who's 90 kilos, right? Because the other thing is that even when we look at the studies with in obese individuals, if they go over, let's say, shoot over protein, this tends to be beneficial anyway, because it's going to help them. And there's another thing, is that if, say, you are a climber and let's say you're a much larger climber than the average climber build, if you're worried that potentially you're eating too much protein to try and fit in with your macronutrient spread, then aim for the protein goal of the body weight, of the total body weight that you want to be. So let's say you're a climber and you're sitting at, let's say, above 20% body fat, then you may be wanting to try and, let's say, go down to 15 or something like that. Then what you do is you just look at your body weight at what it would be at 15% body fat if you were to reduce that, and then use that as your protein target. And what you'll find is that you're probably playing around with about 30 grams of protein anyway, either side. So I think the main thing is it really doesn't matter that much unless, like, you are in the position of being very underweight. But then even then you'd scale up if you're working with somebody, you would then scale up your protein to be the body weight that you're wanting to be, or the healthy body weight. So I think it's much of a muchness, really. But I couldn't find any. I had a quick look to try and find some history of why the majority is done with total body weight, but it's probably just ease. I think it's just the ease of the studies.
Yeah, I'm not sure why. It continues to be just a general recommendation, and they kind of fluctuate where they want it to be. But like, really, I don't know. The studies that we have that actually look at muscle protein synthesis, like it just so consistently falls in this 1.5 to 2.5 grams of leucine, which correlates to 20 to 25 grams of protein.
Of a high quality protein. Yeah.
High quality protein. Yeah. And like, I'm trying to think of like a scenario where, because if a person's underweight, then we would want to ramp their protein up. Like the kilograms per kilogram body weight wouldn't adequately serve their protein. If they were extremely heavy weight wise, whether muscle or fat, then that would overestimate what it was. They probably still wouldn't need that much. But again, like, if you're trying to lose weight, there's benefits of protein for trying to lose weight. I wouldn't recommend, like, if they were eating more protein, that would probably be pro their goals. So I'm just struggling to find a scenario where where I wouldn't just like start with this 20 grams. And obviously when you're working with clients, when I work with clients, you know, it's not just like I don't just say 20 grams per meal. Like that is how it goes to a certain extent, but we work with them, you know, and I try to fit it in the way it goes. If they're eating more than that, I'm not usually trying to titrate it down unless it's inhibiting their ability to get the other things that are important.
Exactly.
But I haven't really had to do that with anybody yet. Like once you start adding this protein in, except for people who are very specifically aiming to get a lot of protein per meal, we oftentimes end up, like usually I'm working with people more to try to increase their protein in specific meals, not decrease it in other ones.
Yeah, exactly. And again, it goes to the real world. You know, we talk about 20 grams of protein. That's very easy to do with like a whey protein supplement, right?
Yeah.
But it's a lot more difficult to do with a chicken breast. So a chicken breast is probably going to be about 40 grams of protein. Yeah. So what this tends to do is two things. One, it gives you freedom to not feel that you have to eat huge amounts of food, because when you realize that a chicken breast in theory could be divided into 2 meals, one, it could save you money, and two, it does. But in the real world, no one does that. No one is going to cut their chicken breast in half, right, for a meal. They'll have the whole chicken breast, right? So you take that into account. You're like, okay, so this person is having 40 grams of protein in this meal, but say for breakfast, if they just have oats porridge, I will almost always say to them, well, that's not going to give you enough protein. So you need to add something to that to bring the protein up to roughly 20 grams. Yeah. And if you want to chop your chicken breast in half and have half in breakfast and half later, then so be it. But yeah, I mean, in terms of just reiterating kind of the latest on kind of where these ranges are, I've got a good summary here, which is basically we're looking at, on training days, female athletes are required 1.4 to 1.7 grams per kilo. The day following a regular training session, male endurance athletes are required 2.1 to 2.7 grams per kilo. And 2 days after the last resistance training session, amateur male bodybuilders required 1.7 to 2.2 grams per kilo. And these are what they call indicator amino acid oxidation studies. So looking at basically the amount of protein or amino acids that are oxidated and to put them back into balance. Yeah. So this sits in the same range, this kind of 1.6 to 2.2. I mean, again, listen to our protein podcast, because we go on more about that. But at the end of the day, it seems to be that much more than 1.8 grams per kilogram doesn't seem to meaningfully benefit body composition. Yeah, much more. It seems to be kind of the cutoff. And if you look at that and then divide that by per meal, you'll see that it ends up in that kind of 20-25 gram meal.
Yeah.
Okay. So we have one from James Lister. And this is to you, Brian. So he says, "Hi, Brian. Has the next episode already been recorded?" No, it hasn't. This is it now. If it hasn't, I'd like to ask the following question: what are the benefits of different types of protein? Is there much difference between casein and whey protein isolate and whey protein concentrate? I'm thinking along the lines of casein being marketed as a slow release for before bed. But is this just marketing nonsense trying to sell more product?
It's kind of both, is what I think. I think that there is a lot of marketing nonsense in that, but we also have evidence that like slow release proteins do absorb slowly and have a longer, you know, if you look at the curve, it's, you know, it has much less, a less steep rise and a less steep fall. So it has a longer period of action compared to whey, which has a very sharp rise and a very sharp fall. But when you actually measure the area under the curve, they end up being about the same. And various studies have tried to, like, I guess, quantify whether that difference is meaningful. And I'm unaware of any that have actually shown that the difference between having a slow release one is better or not. So when people ask, like, should I have a slow release protein before bed, or should I, have special proteins for special times of the day? I usually say it does not matter. But I mean, that being said, there are other things that we don't really consider when we're just looking at like protein kinetic studies, or that, the rise and the fall of how protein's absorbed. So like if you're eating something that's slower released while you're going to sleep, then maybe it has an influence on what your hunger level the next morning, and maybe that influences things. So there could be some benefits that just haven't really been examined. And if somebody is willing to, if they have the resources, have a slower protein before bread, or even better, just like have something that's going to be digested even slower, like, a whole food based protein, because that might make a difference. But if you're looking at like muscle protein synthesis and whether it'll make a difference on that or on recovery or any of these other things, I would say that the science doesn't support that there's any meaningful difference between different types of protein. It's just maybe whether it has an effect on your general diet.
Yeah, I mean, the big thing I got was basically the 24-hour area under the curve for protein is still more important than the acute 1 hour. So if you're taking away protein, yes, it's going to be digested and the amino acids will be in circulation somewhat faster than casein. But what we've seen is that just doesn't really matter. It doesn't seem to make an impact. However, what I did do is I did prize out the differences between the two and whether there is somewhat of a difference between them, just as a food. So, in general, casein is the insoluble portion of milk. It's actually 80% of milk. I didn't know that.
Your cheese.
Yeah, but I didn't actually realize it was that high.
Yeah.
And the whey is the soluble part. So the only big things that I found was what we call peptides. So peptides are chains of amino acids, and
short chains. Like proteins are also chains of amino acids, but they tend to be hundreds, tens if not hundreds of amino acids long. Whereas peptides are like 2 to maybe 10.
Yeah. So I'm just going to run through a few of these. So in casein, we have something called alpha S1 peptide. And this is the one that's thought to actually be the part of milk that causes the allergies, outside of, lactose intolerance. So any milk allergies, this is possibly the one. It's actually shown to be, I never pronounce this, anxiolytic. Is that right?
Anxiolytic? Like
anxiolytic. Yeah, reduces anxiety. Yeah, anxiolytic, which actually may provide better sleep. So if you have money to burn, it might be worth doing 1 week of having some casein protein before bed, and then the next week having whey protein before bed, if you're doing protein, immediately before jumping into bed, and seeing if there's a difference there. I mean, the pricing is not that different.
No.
There's another peptide called C12, which has been shown to reduce blood pressure and having properties of an ACE inhibitor. So it decreases the production of angiotensin, which causes vasoconstriction. There's another one called glycomacropeptide, which has is an opioid agonist. There's something called casomorphines, which is an opioid agonist, means it's an activator. And the activation of the opioid system reduces intestinal motility. And this might be why it's actually a slower digesting protein, because of this opioid. It has opposites. It has opioid antagonists as well, but the balance is skewed towards the opioid agonist. So in terms of whey protein, what whey has been shown is that whey has been shown to be the better protein when taken as the protein in low protein diets. And that's really, I think, just in terms of the high quality of it. So if someone was eating a low protein diet, whey would be the best one to have, which is kind of a moot point, because I don't know why somebody would do that, but that's where they've seen it. It's like when the protein is like 0.8 grams per kilogram body weight, whey protein had a better effect than other proteins like soy or something like that. And that's most likely to do with the leucine.
Yeah.
Whey is a very cost-effective and efficient way to replace cysteine, cysteine stores. So cysteine is one of the rate-limiting steps in glutathione synthesis, and glutathione is one of the kind of master antioxidants in the body. Glutathione is made up of glutamic acid, L-cysteine, and glycine. And we're going to come to glycine later in as a question. But it's also one of the reasons why I do push on supplemental glycine, because I just think it's a useful thing to have, because it's involved with everything. And unless you're eating, tendinous meats and things like that. Whey protein possibly has anti-cancer properties because of something called lactoferrin and alpha-lactobumin, which are the two peptides in that. Has been shown to reduce postprandial triglycerides. So that's, your fatty acids and glycerol join together that you produce after a meal. So these are kind of the fats, and thus reduce total cholesterol and increase HDL more than casein protein, apparently. Glutamine content is high in whey protein, and that has been shown to improve gut health, reducing intestinal permeability. This is mainly done in Crohn's subjects. And the lactobumin and lactoglobulin, beta lactoglobulin, appear to enhance innate immunity by enhancing neutrophil function. And there is actually a general trend that dairy is anti-inflammatory, despite what a lot of people would say. And then there's something lactoferrin is potentially an anti-cancer molecule due to its ability to bind iron. So so I'll just read this little summary here. It says, when compared to casein protein, whey shows high levels of serum BCAAs and muscle protein synthesis at the same dose for the 1 to 6 hours following exercise, and drastically elevated levels of muscle protein synthesis at both rest and post-exercise when measured within an hour. This is hypothesized to be due to the combination of digestion speed and leucine levels, which appear to spike much more rapidly than casein protein, despite no differences in overall exposure, as assessed by area under the curve. So in general, yes, whey protein is going to be faster digesting, but I cannot think of a time or point where this would be such a need. And I think generally, unless it was the other way around and casein protein was much, much cheaper than whey, and then I'd say, well, maybe it's worth just spending a little bit more on whey protein. The fact that whey is cheaper, I think it is cheaper, and it's much easier to mix as well. That's another thing. I think, yeah,
it's water soluble.
Exactly.
Portion.
Exactly. So I think, the question to that is, he asked about whey protein isolate and whey protein concentrate.
Right.
So quickly on that, concentrate is basically less filtered, right?
Yeah, I think it's 80% protein by mass.
Yeah, so
90% for isolate.
Yeah, so what you're looking at is really, it would be protein per your money, your protein per the penny. So whey protein concentrate in supplement stores and things like that would be much cheaper, because per scoop you're going to get less protein because you're going to have a bit of fat with it. Right. Protein isolate is going to be higher. So if you really wanted to really dial down on that, then yes, whey protein isolate is going to be better there. But these are very small things. It's really actually to do with budget and things.
Yeah, it's a minor difference. It's going to be financial more than anything else. If I'm buying whey protein and I'm looking at a brand, it's really just going to come down to price. In that case, like all other factors aside, I don't really care if I'm getting a concentrate or an isolate, as long as I'm getting the amount of protein that I want in a serving. Like having an extra 2 grams of fat and 3 grams of carb is not, like, that doesn't throw the rest of my diet off.
No. And if it does, then there's other things to be thinking about. Yeah.
Right. So it's just like, what do I want in this moment? Like, sometimes it's a concentrate. Sometimes that's the one you end up getting. Sometimes an isolate. But
Yeah.
really, they're the same. They're both whey protein.
That's right. I mean, I think the bigger thing is probably just looking at where the source of the product is coming from, and trying to support good companies and things like that, and better farming practices.
Yeah.
Okay, so we got another one here from, I don't know, maybe this must be an Instagram one. Lewis Hahn Coconuts, and he or she says, what are some of the effects pre and post workout of fats and protein compared to carbs?
Well, fats, I believe we've said many times, they don't really have any ergogenic benefit. They're calories. They're calories you should be consuming. You should not have a fat-free diet. And of course, there's essential fats that we need to be healthy. But there's no real benefit to having them in conjunction with exercise, whether it's before or after, or during. I would avoid them during, just because we shunt so much blood away from the GI system, and fat is already so slow digesting that you're more likely, if you're eating fatty foods during exercise, that's more likely to cause bloating than probably any other food that you're going to consume. So I guess the benefit of having fat after exercise, there's no specific one, except that it probably tastes nice and be, calories that you're getting. And protein, it's kind of the same thing. I mean, we've kind of gotten away from the idea of this nutritional window where, like Tom said earlier, it's really about protein under the curve for 24 hours. We're looking at your overall intake of protein, and it doesn't really matter if you have it before or during or after exercise. We haven't noticed any significant benefits of that compared to just getting enough protein.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't, again, it goes back to practice. If I'm asking someone, so just off the top of my head, I have someone who's on 160 grams or 157 or something today, I looked. It inevitably means that it's going to be much easier for them to have protein around their training. And there may be some benefit of putting protein directly around the training in terms of recovery. So if I have to spread the protein out, I'm going to try and place it, well spread across the day, which is inevitably going to be around training. There are some specific times when protein before training can be beneficial in itself. So for instance, we know that if you were wanting to maximize fat oxidation during training, you wouldn't consume carbohydrates in that session. What you can do, though, is you can consume protein, and the protein doesn't actually impact fat oxidation, which is quite cool. So in theory, and this might go to a question later on, but say in theory you wanted to do a training session first thing in the morning, and it's not a kind of maximal output, maximal power performance session. So you're not trying to improve metrics, and it's maybe just a gym session where you're going to go in and do some deadlifts and things like that. Then you could probably, even if it was just going to be some cardio or something like that, then you could do just a whey protein, like 20 grams of protein as soon as you wake up, which I think is beneficial. And I encourage people to do this. Basically just to kick it off. One, it gets them. So I say to people, have your whey protein in the bathroom, have a pint glass there, make a pint of water with whey protein in it and drink that. Because one, it gets them with a pinch of salt as well. One, it gets them hydrated first thing in the morning by having a full pint of liquid. And then you get the whey protein in, which kicks you out of being in a catabolic state after night. You're smiling. Why are you smiling?
It just feels like a very English thing to do, to have a pint of something in the morning.
Well, of course.
I prepare a protein shake for myself for the next morning. I don't want to make it the next morning. I just do it beforehand, and I have it in the fridge overnight.
Right.
If I anticipate it, which with school now is like always. I just don't want to. I work out before I go to school, and I don't want to eat anything at 6 a.m. So
no, well, there you
go. I have a protein shake because I fully agree. Like it's a good way to kick things off. And again, like when we're looking at getting protein into your day, which we, like Thomas repeatedly said, we're not going to drill this home. Just go back and listen to the episode. But like, if you're going to fit all the protein into your day and you want multiple of these 20-gram doses, then I don't know. It's better to
Yeah.
just start with one at the beginning of
Yeah.
the day, and it's usually easy enough to tolerate a bit of a shake first thing in the morning, even if you don't have the stomach to eat an entire meal or the time, you know, and you don't want to do it before working out.
Yeah. So that's there's benefits putting protein there, and
Right.
yeah. So
I was gonna say these are kind of like, they're not really related. We get away from, I guess, the science of nutrition on these, and we start going into the art of it.
Yeah, exactly.
Like this is you making decisions about what works best for you in your day, because it's not like, scientifically it doesn't really matter if you have it right before or right after. Like if you're getting the same amount of protein, probably it's going to work out the same for you if you track your progress. Like if you could somehow split universes and track progress in both of them, probably would not make a huge difference on your gains or your recovery or anything. But it will make a difference on how happy you are as a human, or how easy it is for you to manage your nutrition. And that could make a difference in motivation and how well you actually adhere to, you know, a specific nutritional protocol across time. And that
100%.
makes a difference. It just isn't something that we're studying. It's just part of working with an individual or working with yourself.
Yeah, and you know, this is the whole thing, is that the consistency over months is going to really be what gets you feeling and performing better. So, for instance, say you had a choice now. You either have a whey protein shake immediately before you jump into bed, or you have a whey protein shake immediately upon waking up, or you have both. If you were to do one of those every single day for a month, that's a huge increase in your protein and the consistency of protein and the spread of protein over that month. And I promise you, you will probably feel better for it, and you'll be in better body composition. Yeah. So that's why I say keep the whey protein in the bathroom with a pint glass. Is just like, literally, it's there, it's in front of you. So you take the scoop out, you scoop it, you put the water in, and you drink it down, and within 10 seconds, you have given yourself better nutrition as a protocol. So yes. So what was the actual question? Sorry, pre-post. So fats. So what we do have one study on cyclists where they gave cyclists a low carbohydrate, high fat meal post cycling. It was 1 gram per kilo of fat in that meal, and then the rest of the day it worked out to be another 2.3 grams for fat. I think it ended up being like 3.5 grams per kilogram of fat per that day. Yeah, so it was a high. Anyway, what the study said is that that the high fat diet, or the high fat meal post training session in this subject in this study actually blunted the muscle protein synthesis response, so like the anabolic effect of exercise. So the question comes in is whether this is actually ever real life, and potentially if you are keto, you might have your workout and then have your protein with a fat bomb meal, and maybe this is not such a good idea. The question comes in is that this is obviously a short study, and they looked at genetic cellular markers or to see on this. So whether that actually translates into a blunting, we don't know, but they did say this latter finding suggests that post-exercise high fat feeding may impair the regulation of muscle protein synthesis and post-exercise muscle remodeling, thereby potentially causing maladaptive responses for training adaptation if performed long term. So I don't think it's probably that good idea to have 80 grams of fat
but that,
in
again,
your meal.
That is so much. Like, that's not going to be
I mean, that's the whole day. Most of my clients sit on that as the average.
Exactly. That's like where I sit. That's where most people are going to sit, like 60 to 100 grams in a day. So if you're having that in a single meal, It's like you got done with your workout and all you could find at the house was the jar of peanut butter.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying, is that the only people I would think this would apply to would be people who are doing keto, right? Because if you're on keto, you're maybe pushing about 200 grams of fat per day.
Yeah.
So you're going to have to get it in somewhere.
Right.
So, but then
it's a different population also.
Yeah. Who knows? But then you are,
like, we're shifting different enzymes around in the body to be able to, work better on a keto diet anyway. And like, I would suspect without anything else that probably if we compared a keto population that had already adapted to a high fat diet to one that is just like suddenly being given this high fat diet, that they would probably perform better muscle protein synthesis wise in those conditions, simply because their body has already adapted to it. And we don't know what these, I haven't seen the study, but was this a novel diet for the cyclists? Was this their daily?
I can't remember actually, but I'll send it. It was 2016 Morton.
Yeah.
Post exercise high fat feeding suppresses P70SK1 activity in the human skeletal muscle. Yeah. So that's that is downstream from mTOR, or was mTOR downstream from that? I can't remember. Anyway, so in general, there, apart from maybe medium chain triglycerides, which that's even dubious whether that provides any benefit. And certainly if you do a bolus of that before training, you might run to the toilet. There isn't any, I don't know of any research that has said that if you take specifically fat before training, that it's going to improve things. The other thing is that carbohydrate drives its own metabolism. So when you consume carbohydrate, your metabolism ramps up to burn more carbohydrate. This is acutely. So if you were to eat carbs now, everything would ramp up to use up almost all of those carbs. When you eat fat, it doesn't actually do that. What happens is that you just end up just storing the fat that you're eating and burning it at a rate that you need. Right. So you don't stimulate fat metabolism by eating more fat acutely. You do stimulate carbohydrate metabolism by eating carbohydrate acutely. If you were to scale up the amount of fat that you eat in your diet and pull down carbohydrate, you would change your metabolism to be more quote unquote fat burning and less carb burning, and vice versa. So acutely having more fat just before exercise will do nothing but maybe make you feel uncomfortable in your stomach. It would slow down the digestion, or the emptying of your stomach. So if you were to have some carbs and a lot of fat to go into a training session or a performance session, that probably wouldn't be so good, because that fat would probably prevent the carbs from being digested and then the glucose making it into your system. That would probably slow that down. Right. So that's not really helpful. So put it like this: if we go to the kind of famous bulletproof coffee scenario where you're having fat butter in your coffee with MCT, I don't have a problem with MCT in coffee, because MCT. Okay, so next question is from Handful of Blair, which is another one from Instagram. And it says, what constitutes a well-rounded diet? Eating a diversity of things in every meal, or can I eat only almonds for a day, then eat only spinach the next day, and then only salmon the next day? And one day a month, I subsist on only chia seeds. Obviously exaggerated, but in short, what are the relevant time scales in which I should eat a diversity of things? You guys are positive and preach a simple, balanced diet. And I leave the podcast feeling like I know what is healthy. I like this approach. But do you think any foods are just straight up bad for you? Saying processed foods is a cop-out. Okay, so he's got two questions here. So right. one is the kind of diversity thing, which is an interesting question. And then the other one is, are there any foods that we would just say, like, just don't eat those at all? So I think this is a great one for you.
Sure.
Well, you did write a book on it.
I did. Yeah. It's, and I actually, I do really like this question, because I feel like, at least growing up in the United States, with the type of, for lack of a better word, nutritional propaganda that we all grow up with, whether it's the food pyramid or My Plate or whatever, like you get this idea, whether you adhere to it or not, that every day should just be this like beautiful rainbow of different foods, and that you should have a little bit of all of them day to day. But that's not really important nutritionally. Like, so in the book that Tom is referencing, The Multivitamin Lie, just I don't know why I feel worse about that title now than when I wrote it. But
it's a good book, guys. Like, literally, go to Amazon, pick up the book. Like,
yeah,
I don't think he's getting rich off it, but every little helps.
I'm certainly not.
But it's a good book, though. I mean, it's part of my coaching. I have part of your spread of what is the minimum you could eat.
Hey, nice. I like that.
I don't know if I need to give you royalties for that, but
no, not at all. Anyway, I try to explain it rather that, like, I think looking at your diet from a weekly basis is more realistic, and you probably could stretch it to a month or even longer, depending on what we're talking about. Like, but the bottom line is our body has storage mechanisms for every essential nutrient that we need. There's no nutrient that if you don't get it for a day or even for a week, and usually for a month, that you are going to go into any overt deficiency. And so there's no reason to build every single day as if you need to get this diversity in. Now, when we're talking about like salmon is a good source of protein, spinach is not a good source of protein. So like when we're looking at the macronutrients, then it's a little bit more important. You should be getting a diversity of macronutrients every day. In other words, you should be getting protein, carbs, and fat every single day. But beyond that, like it doesn't matter. Like if you have spinach a lot, like if you go and you have just like a gigantic salad or a large bowl of broccoli or some veggie soup, and then you don't have as much the next day, like that's not the end of the world. Like if your diet across a week looks like half of the days you have 6 servings of vegetables and half the days you have 2, then you're averaging around a healthy diet, and that's the important thing. Yeah. So like I don't want people to think that, like, to get lazy about their diet in a way and be like, oh well, I can just eat a healthy diversity of food the next day because today doesn't really matter. Like that's not what the idea is. The idea is don't get hung up on the idea that you absolutely have to force something into your diet, because if your diet is healthy, then across time, whether it's a week or a month or a year, you are getting a healthy diversity of foods, and build your diet around that diversity. But just don't feel obligated in the day that if you come to the end of the day and you haven't had your, the 4 to 6 servings of vegetables that you wanted to get in there, that you absolutely have to like stomach one more serving of vegetables before you tuck in for the night.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really the consistency thing. So if your consistency is that, if for your lifestyle, your consistency is 3 days a week, you have a really big, like, colorful salad with your protein source, then, and you do that almost every single week, that is much better than if you are struggling to put stuff together the whole time because you're trying to get in, fruits and veggies every day. Now, obviously, we're not saying that. I don't know. It's very difficult not to do that. But I have seen some clients' food diaries, and I will say, unfortunately, it happens to be U.S. food journals that seem to be the worst for this. Is that the diversity seems to be less with my US clients than with European clients. And I don't know if that's just food culture or just access to fresh vegetables or something like that. But that tends to, the diversity I tend to drive more with US clients than anybody. And yeah, and the way that they talk about it really is just spread things out. I mean, there are things that I do, which I do because it's just now habit. So almost every single day I have a salad that is cucumber, tomato, and peppers. Like I just have that with almost everything. And I sometimes have it a side salad, or I make a really big version of it with other stuff and have like chopped steak on top of it or stuff like that. And then add carbs to it. I don't go out of my way to be more diverse. Sometimes I have sweet potatoes, sometimes I have potato, sometimes I have rice, but I tend to stick to kind of the same sort of things and then just, go back and forth. And I find, I mean, I don't think, but yes, I certainly don't, if I have a day where my eating might not be very diverse, I don't think of it as, oh God, I've wasted a day. Because, say for some reason I just had a McDonald's, which I haven't had for God knows how long, but say just one day I had a McDonald's and that was the only thing I ate, I wouldn't be stressed about that, right? As if I didn't get my, my K2 and my magnesium and, because I didn't have any veg. No, because generally the rest of my week and the rest of my month as a total is pretty good going in terms of that. So, So yeah, we're not recommending that you just try and eat chia seeds or almonds for the day. I mean, it'd probably be an interesting experiment, but I don't think anyone's ever been in that position to do that. So yeah, in terms of that, that's such a good thing. But what I will say, because I quickly brought up one of my documents that I give my coaching, and I'll quickly read what I've got of Brian's here. Because this is actually interesting. So Brian's book is all about basically how you can meet the recommended daily allowance for your nutrients with just eating real food. So he has a quick summary which I put in, and it's Brian's quick summary for perfect nutrition. And he just says, eat 1 cup of cooked legumes per day, eat 1 handful of nuts every day, eat 2 cups of cooked vegetables every day, eat 1 piece of fruit every day. So that's not difficult to do. And by doing that, you're probably pretty much hitting your RDAs for stuff. There's some more specifics. So for instance, this one, I'll just read this one mixed one. But he says, this would provide 100% of your RDA for all nutrients. And this is about 1,220 calories per day. So he said 100 to 150 grams of meat, 1.5 cups of dairy, 1 egg, 40 grams of legumes, 150 grams of starchy vegetables, 250 grams of non-starchy vegetables, 30 grams of mushrooms, 1 piece of fruit, 40 grams of nuts, half a cup of cooked pasta, and 1 slice of bread. So that for a day would meet all your RDA for vitamins and minerals. And a lot of people think that, and that's the whole point of the book, is that a lot of people think that you need to supplement with a whole bunch of other stuff because, the soil is bad and things like that. Mm-hmm. But yeah, totally worth picking up the book. I don't even know how much it is now. I think it's like a tenner, 10 pounds or something.
It's not even that much. I don't know how they price it and other things, but I think I set it at like $5 in the US.
Well, I think you should set it to $35 now.
Yeah, you got a sale going on. It's for limited time only, $25 a book.
That's right. Anyways, okay. So thanks for that, Blair. Yeah. In terms of the second question is there any food that you can think of that was just like a no-go food?
No, aside from any food that you have a reaction to. If you have an allergy to peanuts, do not eat peanuts.
Yes. That would not be a wise thing. Yeah. I mean, apart from, which I don't think you can even find, like really old-fashioned margarine, like trans fat margarine.
Right.
Which I don't think is actually legal anymore. I don't think it exists anywhere.
Yeah, I don't think so. Yeah, I would have said trans fat, but I also didn't want to, cop out and just list a processed food.
Right. Oh, that's true. Yeah.
So yeah, like there's no food that I would say just completely avoid. And I wouldn't even say processed food completely avoid. No. Like you are okay to enjoy processed food from time to time.
Yeah.
It should be the bulk of your diet. That's all that we're saying.
And and the reason for that is because of the diversity, and that's really what it is. Is that the reason that fast food is fast and tasty is it causes people to just use it because it's there. It's made for you. You don't have to think about it, and it tastes exactly how you remember it tasting the last time you ate it. So, but the problem is that if you're doing that for, let's say, one meal every single day, you're dropping the diversity thing. Unless it's fast food that includes fresh veg. That's really the biggest thing with processed food, is that it tends to be slightly poorer in the balance of macronutrients. So it'll be higher in carbs, lower in protein, higher in fat, and it just doesn't tend to have much nutrition. So it's not bad because it's somehow giving you poisons. It's bad because it's slightly better than eating, cardboard and things. Actually, no, that's too. I mean, if you have a McDonald's burger, it's a fairly balanced meal from a macro thing, but it's just, anyways. Yeah. Okay.
All right.
Do you want to read some questions?
I want to read some questions too. You're taking all the question reading time, and then you put me on the spot right away. I'm like, I'm answer this one first.
You got okay. That was a point.
This question's from from Pavel Mazentsev. And he writes, collagen, can't remember if you discussed it on the supplements episode, but do you think there is any merit to the argument that the only efficient way to take collagen is to use it about an hour before putting a load on tendons, if the goal is to strengthen the tendons? If it is used a few hours before or after, then the tendons won't be able to absorb it from the blood. So
I think this is so the next one is the same thing, right?
Yeah, the next question is very similar. Thoughts on, this one's from Flea Low. Thoughts on the use of collagen to strengthen your finger tendons. Eric Kerr suggested a daily finger protocol with pre-training collagen loading. So they're both pretty similar, both revolving around this idea of getting blood flow to the tendons, or putting nutrients into your blood and then getting blood flow to the tendons that will carry those nutrients to them.
So, where to start? Okay. I will say what would be worth your time for a deeper dive of this is if you go to useful.coach. I have an article which I wrote in 2016 called Nutrition for Soft Tissue Training, Recovery, and Injury Prevention. And that looks at a lot of the research that was around those 2 years, which basically kicked off this whole supplemental collagen around training by Dr. Keith Barr's lab. And it's a fairly detailed article, which basically I summarize to say that, yes, it could be beneficial. We don't have any good studies that compare collagen to people who are just eating whole protein.
Yeah.
But let me simplify it for people who don't know what I'm talking about. So very simply, our tendons and ligaments are composed of collagen, which are large chains of amino acids, proteins, right? And they are poorly, what's the word? Perfused, yes. So meaning that whereas muscles have a lot of direct blood flow to them, tendons and ligaments don't. What tendons and ligaments are they sit and bathed in serum, and they work like sponges. So when you actually use them, when you put them under stress and they flex and they deform, they will absorb the surrounding plasma. So the idea was that what if you could eat a collagen supplement, that it would be digested, and then you would have the amino acids that form the collagen protein. So the collagen that you're eating literally is collagen from an animal, right? So it would be tendons and ligaments, or ears, or noses, or ground up hooves. I think most of the collagen you buy now is actually from the hides of animals. If you were to eat that, it would get broken down into the amino acids, but it also would be broken down into the constitute peptides, right? So the shorter chains of amino acids before they become large proteins. And so the theory would be is that if you then load your tendons and ligaments about an hour after you consume collagen, then those collagen peptides and amino acids would be in circulation, and then those tendons and ligaments would be absorbing those quote unquote building blocks, so that once you finish your training session, you have kind of shortcutted some of the collagen building because you've absorbed some peptides. So your body doesn't have to build them, or your cells don't have to build them yourself. They kind of augmented it. And so what Keith Barr did in his lab is he did this with Achilles tendons, I think, or it was knee ligaments. I can't remember in my article. It details it. And then he had people doing a kind of a skipping training and then taking a supplement, and they bathed them. Look at the articles because it's fascinating what he saw. And so what we see is that it appears from some of the research papers that collagen supplementation around training appears to be beneficial. It's not for certain. There's very, very, very few studies. Mm-hmm. The studies, as Brian will probably tell you in a minute, that he actually contacted Keith Barr about, and I'll let him finish that, is that what I say to people when they ask me about this is I say it's cheap and it's safe, and it appears we have some research to say that this could be beneficial, with a caveat. Your number one thing is that you should be eating our recommendation for protein, whole protein sources. If you have done that, then the next thing would be maybe this little intervention, which is cheap and incredibly safe, in terms of, because it's just collagen really, is this may actually give you a tiny marginal gain on recovery if at the end of the day it actually is shown that these things are making it into the tissues. Now, anecdotally, a lot of people have been saying that this is benefiting them and that they feel that they're recovering better. What I can't say is whether those people are eating a lot of protein overall now, or have improved the amount of amino acids that are coming into their system, apart from leucine, which is non-existent in collagen, but that is maybe helping them recover, or it's a placebo effect. But put it like this, because I get asked this a lot. When I read all Keith Barr's work, I then contacted a laboratory. Oh, geez, I can't talk today. I actually contacted a lab that month to start inquiring about the price of producing a collagen supplement. This is in 2016. And I had some conversations with people about how to produce a supplement. And the reason I wanted to do this was because I wanted to find a supplement and get it drug tested so that I could say, well, here's collagen. The research is not particularly strong on it, but if you wanted a collagen supplement, because I'm thinking in the terms of Team GB climbers, use this one because this one is being drug tested and it's not from cows, from China or something. Mm-hmm. That was my idea. But the reason I didn't do it in the end was because, one, I didn't want to sell supplements because that just seems like a nightmare and a just terrible in terms of integrity. But two, I thought, what I don't want to be is that I want to end up with egg on my face when the research comes out and says, well, actually, it doesn't really do anything in relation to protein. So that's why I never did relaunch a protein supplement, a collagen supplement. This is not to say that Eric Horst has done the wrong thing with his supplement. He's done very well with it. And he's put it into a lot of the right hands, and good for him. He has a family to support. Mm-hmm. What we don't really know is whether it actually does that much. Even though the research is building up, it's debatable whether it's doing that. So, yeah. Brian, what is a conversation you had with Keith Barr?
I reached out to him because it's important. I already had my own opinion about collagen and its efficacy when the whole hullabaloo started about collagen. And, my big sticking point has been that we just haven't compared it to protein. And so do we really know that it's more effective than dietary protein? And I reached out to him just to see what his take on it was. And he didn't disagree. If you go to my site, I have an article, an update on dietary collagen protein. I'm not going to read his entire quote, but more or less he agreed, and also hedged a little bit in the direction of Tom, which is that, it's a way that we don't know if it'll be effective, but it's also, we know that it's completely safe. We know that, you're not going to have any harm come to you from taking it, and maybe it will provide some benefit. The thing I'm actually more excited about, or excited is perhaps the wrong word, but the thing that I focus on more with his research, with Dr. Keith Barr's research, is the idea that tendon it's a poorly perfused part of the body. All our connective tissue is. It just doesn't have a rich blood supply, and so it's hard to get nutrients to those areas. And our muscles, they're very well supplied with blood. It's very easy to get nutrients there, and whenever we're exercising, we're obviously pumping that much more blood through those areas. So when we've done all these studies on muscle protein synthesis, I guess it's kind of expected. We're not dealing with a hard to nourish tissue. So like maybe collagen doesn't end up working out, but maybe I would say that it does seem that the idea that perhaps if we put our body into this richer nutritional state immediately prior to certain types of exercise, that might be beneficial. I don't think like just in general, like you're going out to climb for a day, I don't think that's not what we're talking about. But like if you're trying to do some recovery activity for your tendons, maybe it is worthwhile to have, if not collagen, then just a protein shake before, and some carb before you go and do these high rep, low intensity finger strengthening exercises or something, because we do know that is going to increase blood flow to that area. They're still not well perfused. They're still not going to get good nourishment, but they'll have better nourishment, and you will perfuse them a little bit more during exercise. And so maybe that's worthwhile, regardless of whether collagen ends up being a miracle tendon grower or not.
Yeah, and that's exactly what that's what I said to Eric when Eric contacted me. I said that what I'm doing is basically giving people, I say, we'll take your protein shake and have a piece of fruit or a glass of orange juice before your tendon session. And yes, I do. I don't personally take collagen, and the reason, the primary reason I don't take it is because it tastes awful. It tastes so bad. It basically tastes like ground up hooves, because that's pretty much what it is. So like, you can dump it in a shake or something. But like this, if you're interested and you have money to burn, then go ahead. And I would have 20 grams of whey protein with about 15 grams of collagen powder. Drink that down and have a piece of fruit, or like a small glass of fruit juice. And the reason for that is just the vitamin C in circulation is going to help, but you don't need very much. You're looking at like 50 milligrams. So don't take a vitamin C tablet. Just have a bit more vitamin C. You could even have a pepper, or just have a meal, whatever. But yes, I think the reason it could be a worthwhile thing is that, say you have an hour every morning to do some sort of training, and you think, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put 2 finger training sessions in, or 1 finger training session and my climbing later. Because the other thing, and you'll see it on my website and you'll see it on Eric's site, is about that your tendons require a recovery period that's much longer than muscle. You're looking at about 6 hours between stressing your tendons before being able to do another session. So what you could do is, it goes back to the previous protein thing. You could wake up in the morning, you could have your whey protein shake, you could dump a little bit of collagen in there, you could do your finger training sessions, and then head off to work, and then have your breakfast at the desk or something like that. So this is a strategy that's good. And everybody who asks me, I say, yes, go for it. I can't promise that it will be beneficial to you to have collagen, but if it does make it better and you feel that you're recovering better, then brilliant. Like what a very cool thing to do. So I think it's good. Is Eric Horse supplement more magical than any other? I don't think that necessarily. He puts leucine in. What was encouraging to me, though, was when I was developing my product, that was what I was going to put in as well. So we obviously read the same data and did that.
So now we have a pint, just to be clear for you guys, keeping track, you have a pint glass of protein shake in the morning, and then you have a little brandy snifter of collagen to go with it.
That's right. That's right. That's right. And maybe a pork pie on the side.
Maybe. All right.
Next one.
So here's a question from Grant Mercer. He writes, have you all talked about the use of creatine in climbing yet? We have, but we're going to talk a little bit more about it because I like talking about it. I know from reading your site that you have a positive attitude towards creatine, but I think there's a lot of misinformation about the supplement. I've heard things like, 1, it's bad for your kidneys and your health. 2, it's only for weightlifters who want pure power. 3, I'll weigh more and therefore climb worse. And 4, related to the above point, creatine will give me worse endurance by virtue of weighing more. So yeah, I don't know how much we talked about some of the myths surrounding creatine. So, but I'll address the bad for your kidneys and your health one right now. There's zero evidence that it is bad for your kidneys. Absolutely zero. Sometimes you will read articles written by doctors who have not read any studies on it, and they will say that it is bad for your kidneys. And because they have this authority as somebody with a medical degree, people are inclined to believe them. However, if you actually go to the research and look at it, you will see that there has never been a study that shows that it causes any kidney damage, that it is hard on the kidneys. The most that we can say is if you already have some form of kidney disease where your kidneys are not functioning how they should be, then maybe you should not be having creatine as well. As for where this myth originally came from, so creatine, it's in our muscles, we break it down when we're ready to excrete it because we're always cycling through it. We break it down into this byproduct called creatinine. And one of the markers that we use to measure kidney health is the plasma creatinine level. It's naturally higher in men than for women because men have more muscle. So our reference range for what's healthy for men is slightly higher than what's healthy for women. And hypothetically, if you took creatine, you would have slightly higher levels of creatinine. But even that hasn't really been shown. We don't even see higher levels of creatinine. But hypothetically, for some individuals, if you take creatine and you're already your reference range was already your plasma creatinine levels were already high, higher on the normal end of the spectrum, maybe it pushes you into a realm that a doctor looking at that would say, oh, your kidneys aren't filtering creatinine well, and that is a sign of loss of kidney health. But in this case, it actually wouldn't be. It's just that you as an individual have more creatinine simply by byproduct of having more creatine, having more muscle, and having a higher creatine loading within the muscles. So absolutely not bad for your kidneys. If you have kidney disease, talk with your doctor. But if you have kidney disease, your diet's going to look a lot different in general. You're probably not taking a lot of these supplements, and there's certainly going to be a lot of foods that your diet's going to be very different. And it's not bad for your health at all beyond the kidneys. The kidneys is really where people focus. But once we leave the kidney system, there's still no downside health-wise.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I had exactly all that. The only thing I had was if you are taking creatine and you are going for blood testing, or you have some blood tests coming up, maybe you can stop supplementation for 2 weeks, or just tell the doctor and say, by the way, I'm taking creatine, so your creatinine might be higher than baseline. But that's it.
I would even just wait until you should. In general, with your healthcare providers, you should, tell them the supplements that you're taking, especially if you're taking any drugs. But creatine, we make it ourselves. We eat it in our food. I'm really not worried about people. People should be worried about it interacting with anything. And probably even then, your creatinine levels on your plasma test won't be high. And if they are, and your doctor pulls you aside and is like, oh, your creatinine levels are high, then if you haven't already told them that you take creatine as a supplement, then that's a good opportunity to say, okay, well, I do take creatine, so what influence will that have on my result? And hopefully they're, an understanding doctor who isn't just going to immediately jump to the hyperbole train of creatine's bad for your kidneys, and actually understands the data that we have on it.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
How about did you have something more to add?
No. I mean, just saying we've I think it's 25 years now we have of creatine studies. So it's pretty much there.
How about the idea that creatine is only for weightlifters who want pure power? I want pure power. Why don't climbers want pure power? I don't understand why weightlifters are the only ones who need it.
Okay, so let me because it's all. Should we just? I'll answer it in a general sense.
Yeah.
So, as we spoke about on the supplement episode where we go into creatine, there are 2 and possibly 3 things that happen. Well, the main side effect we see with creatine is that it binds with water, so your muscle hydration is going to increase.
Yep.
Which is why if you have a lot of muscle and you take creatine, certainly if you load it, you may drift up in weight. Let's say a kilo and a half, if not more. Yeah. And again, it depends on how much muscle you have. It's very similar to carbohydrate, right? If you're a skinny, low-muscled climber who doesn't eat any carbohydrate and then eats a load of carbohydrates, their weight is going to drift up a little bit.
Yeah.
If you're more muscly a climber, your weight is going to drift up a lot. And if you stack creatine and lots of carbohydrate, your weight is going to go up a fair bit. So I imagine that let's say a heavier set climber of, let's say 80 kilos does a high carb creatine loading 2 weeks. I could imagine them going up maybe 2 kilos in weight, right? This is hydration. So point being, and we're not going to talk about the mechanism of why creatine actually works well, and it's fairly recommended in power sports. Do listen to our supplement episode for a long ramble on that. Where I have put like this, I have changed my recommendation of creatine because what is happening is that we are getting a lot of feedback from the climbing community. And I don't know if I mentioned this in the supplement episode. I'm pretty sure I did, but I don't know. Is that a lot of people are saying that they're getting pumped quicker when they're on creatine. And there's some confounding things here, which my friend Edward Gibson Smith, who's a sports nutritionist in the UK and a very smart one at that, is currently in preparation of doing some study and some research on blood kinetics in the forearms on creatine. So we're going to start getting closer to whether this is true or just mythology in the climbing community. However, for route and sport climbers, I'm getting enough feedback from people saying I can't take creatine because I get pumped out way quicker than when I wasn't. And I know it's true because when I stopped taking creatine, I stopped getting pumped. So what I've now changed my turn on it is that the typical way people are said to take creatine in the research is that you have like a 20 gram a day loading dose, which you do for a week. And that basically supersaturates your muscle with creatine very rapidly. And then you take like 3 to 5 grams every single day to maintain that level of creatine in the muscles, right? This may have an impact on what is going on with blood flow and the pump and all this. Because if you think about the populations that tend to be on creatine, this may not actually be an issue because it might be massive muscles like legs, or as a bodybuilder, you want to generate that pump because that can be a stimulus for muscle hypertrophy. Anyway, and to be honest, and this is one of the things I've always said, is that, if creatine does give you more pump, then you could potentially put it into a training block rather than buying your expensive blood occlusion cuffs. So you could work with the pump. But in general, what I've now done is that I do think creatine is an incredibly useful supplement, especially for vegan vegetarian populations, which we know have lower levels. And almost every vegan vegetarian I've worked, which hasn't been that many, but when we put creatine in, they have certainly improved their performance, and no one has said that they're getting pumped. But the way I'm now saying people should take it, if they want to take it, is as a recovery supplement. So on the days that you train, you take 3 to 5 grams. And I normally say if you're a woman, then you take 3 grams. As a guy, you take 5 grams. But just basically take a teaspoon of creatine on the days after you do your training days. And on the days that you don't do any training, then don't take creatine. Now, people would say, well, you're not getting the benefit of saturating the muscle with creatine. Possibly not. But what you are doing is you're probably providing more creatine in your diet and in your muscles than you would just eating food.
Yeah.
Certainly more if you were not eating any meat. And what creatine can do is it can free up other substrates for things like methylation. It can free up glycine, and glycine can be used for other reasons such as collagen synthesis. So I think creatine, I really think it's very healthy. I think more and more people are looking at it as a kind of vitamin. So you don't need to do the super saturation loading protocol. What you could do is just try it by putting it in as a recovery aid on the days that you train. And I'm pretty sure that you'll find that your power reserve may go up. Whether you get more pumped, I don't know, but it's worth certainly trying.
Yeah.
Because the more people we come out that say, no, it just seems to work this way. Again, we don't see it so much in boulderers because it's the time under tension is less. But with sport climbers who are sitting on their hands for much longer, it seems that they get pumped out. So we don't know, and that's why we need smart people like Ed to do research papers and other people to look at this, and then we'll know. And you know what? It's going to be cool, because what will happen is that in 25 years of research, we will suddenly have one sport that says, in this one sport, creatine doesn't seem to be a benefit for climbers, which is pretty cool, right?
Yeah.
In sports science, because I haven't found any other papers. Most papers say people get better or they don't really have an effect.
Right.
But climbing, or rather sport climbing, maybe it just, because of the musculature of the forearms and the amount of tension and how long the tension is under, maybe it's not a good supplement for climbers. So
yeah.
And again, what you could do is you could put it into a specific training block. So, you know, what I have done with people is that when they work with me, I will put it into their big power and volume block, and then we taper it down. And I did this with one climber we basically had creatine all the way through the coaching, and then 2 weeks before he went on his big Spain trip, we cut creatine out. And for 2 reasons. One, because I thought, well, if he gets less pumped, then this is going to be better for him. And 2, we might reduce his weight by 500 grams, which might be, you know, some polish. So so that's what I'm generally recommending now. I still recommend creatine. I still think someone should try it. It's very, 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 very safe, and it's very cheap nowadays. And it's certainly worth just trying. And what I think it can do is it can just help you get more training quality and volume in, and that cumulative effect is going to be better. So that's
exactly.
I think that's it.
It will make you weigh more. It will not give you worse endurance unless you suffer the pump effect that we're talking, whether that is, real or not, or I shouldn't say real or not, but, whether that's related to creatine or not. It's not going to affect your endurance aside from that. And it will give you some pure power. Pure power is something you want as a climber. Yeah. We're a power-driven sport.
Yeah.
All right.
Right. Okay.
So this question is from Chris Whedon. He's got a few questions. 2 of them I'm going to combine together, but he says, it would be great to hear your views on other supplements such as agmatine sulfate, citrulline malate, L-arginine, and L-carnitine, and L-norvaline. There's a lot of research in other sports, but would they benefit climbers? And then he also writes, maybe even your thoughts on peptides such as BPC 157 for healing and recovery. So I'm going to combine those 2. And then a second question of the best food and supplements to improve sleep quality. Do things like yogurt, ZMA, melatonin, and ashwagandha help? And if so, how?
Which ones do you want to take? Because I had a look at the first bunch.
I looked at the first bunch too. I didn't look much.
Okay. Well, okay.
That's
So
what we're gonna take.
Okay. So I'll tell you a little bit of what I had, and then you can fill in. So what I found. So I had never heard of agometine sulfate.
I had not either.
No. So what I did is I can end up grouping them. So the agometine sulfate, L-arginine, and L-norvaline are all related to nitric oxide production. L-norvaline I had never heard of at all.
Yep, I hadn't either.
Okay, so this agometine sulfate, from what I can understand, is that the only research that's been really done is with injections, not that much on oral ingestion. And apparently it's fairly interesting neurotrophic because neurotransmitter, and it can impact pain and also help with drug addiction. But I have a feeling that Chris was going down a kind of nitric oxide research thing. So it appears to activate the production of nitric oxide more potently than arginine does. So it potentially is better for producing nitric oxide. But that's all I really got on there. I don't know if you found anything else more interesting on magnetine sulfate.
No, not really. I mean, kind of. I agree. They all seem to be related to NO production, but I could not, like you said, there's a lot of research in other sports, but I could not find that research in other sports.
No.
And I found a lot of like rat and in vitro research. Yeah. And then when it was applicable to humans, it was injection. And anytime you're getting an injection of something, you're not getting it from me or Tom. And you're probably not getting it from anybody unless you're participating in the study or have a condition that specifically calls for the injection of it.
So
there's the same thing with BPC 157. It looks like it's an injection.
That's right.
So I can't really state about whether it's good for healing or recovery, or whether agometine sulfate or L-norvaline, which are the two supplements in that list that do not have a lot of research on them. I can't really recommend them. I certainly can't administer them if they're in the form of a shot or an injection.
Yeah, so L-norvaline apparently is an arginase inhibitor, and arginase inhibits the production of nitric oxide. So that I assume is what his idea was, or that was he looking for. That is that this is helping the production of nitric oxide.
Yeah,
through the inhibitor of arginase, and then this magnetine is increasing nitric oxide. But yeah, those two. I mean, apart from when you want to look at this sort of stuff, a good starting place is somewhere called examine.com.
Yeah.
Because they have that's really a good launch pad to start trying to tease out what is there out there.
Yeah. As for L-arginine, L-citrulline malate, those two are also related to nitric oxide production. And L-arginine has been pretty thoroughly discounted now as a good source of, or a good way to, like, NO, like to produce it, to get it. Like we use L-arginine, but it doesn't appear that supplementing it with actually boosts its production at all. And citrulline malate has maybe a little bit, I don't want to say better evidence, but it's a little bit more positive right now, but it's not as nearly as well studied as L-arginine is. And I kind of have the feeling that as we study it more, it's not going to be also not going to really pan out. There was a meta-analysis that somebody sent me recently that I have to read through that did show that, like, across all these studies, it is overall more beneficial. But again, the problem is meta-analyses are really more like their power comes from being able to combine many studies so that you have many participants, but we still just don't have that many. So it's going to be a fairly weakly powered meta-analysis, whatever its results are. And we shouldn't take that as like the gospel on what is actually happening at this point.
So you're probably thinking, for those who don't know, like, why the hell are we talking about nitric oxide in the first place? So nitric oxide is a vasodilator. So the idea behind this is that if you can increase vasodilation, you're going to be able to transport oxygen and nutrients to your body, to your muscles quicker or more efficiently. And that's why we do see there is some performance benefit with increasing nitric oxide. Most of the studies are done with using nitrates. So something like a beetroot shot. And there is some data to show that you can get that. So vegetables that are high in nitrates that could be beneficial are things like spinach and beets. I think that's the main two. But yeah, so the reason that people are looking at things like L-arginine and citrulline, or L-citrulline, citrulline malate is L-citrulline bound to a salt.
Right.
Is basically, these are all part of this nitric oxide pathway, and so you're providing the substrates in the pathway to basically augment nitric oxide production, and that's kind of the idea. L-arginine is a kind of darling because it gets shoved into every single pre-workout, right? If you go look at your pre-workout, if you take a pre-workout, which I don't recommend, is that you're going to have L-arginine in there, and it will be touted as it increases nitric oxide, which it doesn't really. Certainly, if you wanted to do that with a supplement, then L-citrulline or citrulline malate is probably going to be the better way. And I put a little thing here saying 1.76 grams of citrulline malate is needed for 1 gram of citrulline, and that's really what you want. You want the citrulline. And this is from examine.com. Circulatory health, or to alleviate erectile dysfunction, 1,000 milligrams of citrulline 3 times a day with meals, for a total of 3,000 milligrams of citrulline per day. And in sports performance, you're looking at about 6,000 milligrams of citrulline an hour before exercise, or 8,000 milligrams of citrulline malate. So your little pre-workout would have to be a fairly decent scoop size if you're going to get, enough L-arginine to generate because L-arginine, I think it's L-arginine to citrulline, and that's where the NO is produced. I think it's when it binds to citrulline or something. I can't remember. Something like that. Anyway, point being is, with this sort of stuff, with these sort of supplements, it's not that I don't recommend them. It's just that I don't know how to recommend them, because I don't know how you would ever measure whether these things help you or not. So for instance, say you took citrulline, which is, if you're going to do something for nitric oxide, then do the beetroot shots, which is nitrate, or try citrulline. But I think the question is that if you just take citrulline and then do your climbing, if you do notice like a progressively better performance, or you find that you're not getting so pumped or something like that, or you just feel that you're not as gassed, then you probably carry on with that. It's probably, increasing nitric oxide in the body is not necessarily a bad thing, certainly for blood pressure and things like that. So, and apparently erectile dysfunction may be improved, which is always a good thing.
Vasodilation.
Yeah, exactly. So this is one of the reasons why you want to have things like spinach and stuff, and dark leafy green vegetables in your diet, and vegetables just as a whole, is because of this, the nitrates. No, I knew you were going to say that. So yeah, so this is one of the confusing things, since we're on the topic, is that this is the odd thing, is that I don't know if we do know this for sure yet. So one of the reasons we don't want to eat processed foods like bacon and salamis and things like that is that they use nitrates to preserve the food. It's potassium nitrate. Yeah. And this has been linked, I don't know if it's causally, but correlatory is to health outcomes, bad health outcomes, which is why we avoid them.
Yeah.
But spinach and beets and other vegetables that contain nitrates have been beneficial. I don't know, because potassium nitrate is going to increase NO, right?
It will, yeah.
But no one, I don't know anybody who would recommend taking potassium nitrate as a supplement.
No.
No.
I think like in vegetables, one of the things that we're concerned with like processed foods is in the cooking process, some of the nitrates get converted into nitrosamines, and those are bad for the gut. And we just don't really do the same thing with vegetables, the nitrate-rich vegetables.
That makes more sense. Yeah.
But
so it's basically a byproduct of heat, maybe.
Yeah. So like it's like the high heat, the high heat frying of the foods that we are high in nitrates that yields some of the poor health results, and then also just the unhealthy nature of many of the foods that are preserved with nitrates compared to a nice handful of spinach or beetroot.
You're
right. I did kind of wonder. I was like, it is a little strange that you can just, like, if you're making your own cured meats, you can go out and you can buy potassium nitrate, but please don't consume it. Part of the reason also for that is because there's it can be dangerous, like it can be toxic, and
because of the potassium.
Not the potassium, just like the levels of nitrate that you'll put into your system can be dangerous in supplement. It's like getting a caffeine powder, and we're going to address a question with caffeine coming up. Like caffeine, you're probably never going to overdose on caffeine if you get it from food. It's hard anyway, but if you have a powder, it can be very easy to overdo it, because you're not thinking about how much you're really putting into your body.
Yeah, and this brings up a point, actually, is that, and again, a resource like examine.com is good because they will give the toxicity right at the bottom of each page. When they look at a supplement, they'll give the toxicity on stuff. Interestingly, L-norvaline had a bunch of stuff that talked about toxicity at 5 grams. There was one paper I spotted. There's one paper I spotted that kind of tried to push back against that, but I didn't spend long on researching this. But this just goes into a point where, just because these things are in common, they're talked about or commonly spoken about, doesn't mean that they're safe in terms of just, everyone talks about L-arginine, so I might as well buy a tub and take L-arginine. No, like you wouldn't want to do that. You need to, because they're accessible. It still means that you should be careful with the dose that you get. And I think this is one of the problems with now buying powders. You can get a lot of different sups, which are very useful, taurine and caffeine and things like that, which, you don't really want to take a big 5-gram scoop. You don't want to just take your creatine scoop of 5 grams and suddenly take, a 5-gram scoop of L-theanine, for instance. I don't know what that would do. Probably not harmful, but the fact that there's an effect of whatever it is, like 25 milligrams. My scoop of L-theanine is 25 milligrams. I don't know what 5 grams of L-theanine would do. I wouldn't want to know. But the point being is that, just be careful with this stuff. If you want to look at a supplement and take a supplement, then do your research, our podcast is a springboard for making you aware of it. But before you take it, you need to go and actually have a look as well, and see what the proper dose is. And don't just think that more is better, because some supplements are very safe. For instance, creatine, you can take 25 grams of creatine in a single day, if not more. The problem is that you might just get a loose stomach. But you wouldn't want to start mega dosing some of these other things. Right, what are we missing? L-carnitine. Okay, so I'm sure we spoke about L-carnitine before on the supplements thing. The reason that people like talking about L-carnitine is the molecule that transports long-chain fatty acids across the mitochondria or into the mitochondria. So the theory is that if you can increase the amount of transporters that will shuttle fatty acids into the mitochondria, then you have created a kind of, you augmented, you made a fat burner, basically. You've increased the amount of fat that you can burn. And there's two problems with this. One, that has just not been shown to be the case.
Right.
Even in the one study I saw, was obese women were taking 2 grams of L-carnitine daily with exercise, and that had no impact on fat burning as such. It may be beneficial for vegans and vegetarians, because L-carnitine you'll get predominantly from animal products. So again, a bit like creatine, there might be some benefit. The big problem I have with L-carnitine is, and I always say this to people who ask about it, is that it just takes you so damn long to build up an amount that's even noticeable. And you're looking at, like, I think it's like 8 to 12 weeks or something. So the studies that, like, people are dosed with 2 or 3 grams per day for like a month, and then they're noticed to have an upregulation in L-carnitine, or is it CPT1 transport or something? But then after all that time, they don't see really a performance benefit,
right,
as such. It's like, well, we took this supplement to see if it would increase L-carnitine in the body, in the cells, and yes, it did. That's great. So we've managed to do that. Does it have any benefit? Well, we can't really see that there's any benefit to having done that.
Right.
So
it's kind of just like, you can increase the amount of fat you can transport across the mitochondrial membrane, but you're not, by taking the supplement, you're not changing how many calories you're burning. You're not changing how your body wants to burn them. You're just making it easier if they happen to want to get more fat across the membrane. It's probably not going to have an impact on, like, maybe there could be some very specific scenarios where we're talking like very specific, probably irrelevant to your scenario, and certainly doesn't like help with weight loss or with increasing fat burning, in any measurable way that we're concerned with.
No, and that's unfortunately, so that's really it. So if there's a deficiency, as in most things, if there's a deficiency and then you resolve the deficiency, then health is better. And that's the same for any vitamins and things. But I think a lot of this stuff is that, this is the thing with supplements, is that there's a lot of supplements that could do something. And these kind of marginal gains, all these little things could add up to produce a performance. And yes, that could be the case. But I think the problem comes in is that it's, one, how do you measure that? Like, can you really tell? And two, there comes a point where, money is not really an issue with these things. These are all fairly cheap. But it's just like, do you want to wake up every day and take 6 different powders and 5 different pills? I mean, maybe for you this doesn't seem to be an issue, but well, then try it. But I think the thing with this sort of stuff is that it's not that I don't think it's harmful. I think it's either not doing anything apart from spending a little bit of your money, but I think it's just really a hassle. There are some supplements that have been tried and tested and they do have a benefit, and let's say whey protein, because it increases protein, and creatine certainly seems to be one big hitter. But other than that, there's not many, in terms of powders that you can take that are really going to give you that much noticeable benefit.
How about best food and supplements to improve sleep quality?
So we've got ZMA is what he talks about. So ZMA is zinc, magnesium, and what was the A? Do you know what the A was? Alpha lipoic acid? No. Was it arginine?
Vitamin B6. It's magnesium aspartate. So the A is the
magnesium
salt
aspartate.
The magnesium's attached to.
And then B6 they put in.
Yeah.
So I can't remember the story about this, but you can actually look this up. And I think there's a YouTube clip of the guy who invented this. And basically, if you improve your zinc status, your health is going to improve. So if you're vegan, vegetarian, your zinc might be slightly lower. So taking more zinc could be useful. If you're eating high meat diet and you're not including shellfish and things like that and fish, you may have a higher copper, and having more zinc could help with that in terms of balancing the ratio. Magnesium is good in a general sense, but supplementing magnesium, as Brian will say, and I think he's got a good article on his site about the unnecessary of it. But you're going to get that from dark green leafy vegetables and things like that. And then B6 is a B vitamin, and B vitamins are just general involved in energy metabolism, things like that. ZMA, for some reason, has been touted to help people sleep, and they tend to get fancy, like cool dreams on it. And I remember years ago when I tried it, I think I did have some cool dreams. And I can't remember the reason for that, what that was, but some people they can make it have lucid dreams. Whether that improves sleep, I don't know. But yeah, I think for the price of ZMA, I don't think it's worth taking as a supplement. Certainly not to help your sleep. You might as well, if you want to experiment with having more zinc and magnesium in your diet, then do so. Magnesium is a funny one because everyone talks about magnesium improving sleep. But the last time I looked, there wasn't really strong evidence to say that magnesium was helping people with sleep. And it's become like a thing. I don't know if you know anything better.
No.
But it's just a thing.
Like sleep's one of those hard to objectively measure things like sleep quality. Like you feel like you slept well, you feel like you slept poor, and maybe your sleep tracker like validifies your idea sometimes, but sometimes it doesn't. It's just like I think environmental concerns are going to have a bigger impact on this than any supplement that you can take.
100%. And a rhythm. So I push in my coaching is the rhythm side of things. Yeah. So have a set bedtime and a time to wake up. And I think the wake up time is actually more important because it's one of the things that you could probably control far better. If you make a rule that you always get up at the same time of the day, every day, that will help enforce your circadian rhythm. So you want to wake up same time every day as best as possible, get into bright sunlight or into a bright light into your eyes first thing in the day, and eat something, and that will set the clock. And you could even have a pint of whey protein if you wanted to set the clock. Yeah. But so that's really, in terms of the big thing, is actually is your environment. Then when you go to bed, your bedroom should be as dark as possible. It shouldn't be somewhere that you do. I mean, I'm in my room because unfortunately that's where I am, but it's best to have a bedroom which is just a bedroom, and you do bedroom things in the bedroom. You don't watch television. You don't look at devices. You don't do work. You come into your room and you should feel like going to bed. Those are the big hitters in terms of actually improving your sleep quality. And here's another one which I find cool. Is that when I ask people to shift most of their carbohydrates to the front of the day rather than in the evening, almost everybody says, well, they feel sleepy in the evening. And I go, yes, that's kind of the point, right? So the big thing is that, if you shift most of your carbohydrates in the front of the day, then you can think of it in terms of you want bright light, high energy foods, food volume, like the most of your food, in the daylight hours. And then as you get towards the evening, you're going to be tapering down in food. It's going to get dark. You're going to do more relaxing things. What obviously screws it up is, number one, is caffeine. 99% of all my clients, my first protocol with them is, what do you take before you do training, climbing in the evening? Most of them are like, oh, I have my coffee. Okay, right. We're going to switch the coffee out and we're going to put some carbs in instead. And they're like, what? And this is really tough for them. But I'm like, no, if you can, like, if you want your coffee, have it in the day. Try not to have coffee after like 2 p.m. Like, try and push it. Like, have your coffee in the morning, use that power, the caffeine power. But as much as you can, just don't have any caffeinated beverages as far as you can away from sleep. And I promise you, cumulatively, that your sleep is going to be better and your recovery is going to be better, et cetera, et cetera. Use the carbohydrates, use a high energy carbohydrates to give you that kick of energy if you need that in the evening before you're climbing or training. That's much healthier. And if you think that carbs are bad for you, I'm telling you, caffeine in the evening and screwing up your sleep is a hell of a lot worse than blood sugar, if that's something that you're concerned about. Alcohol is another one. Don't have alcohol before bed. It feels like it's making you sleepy, but it's a sedative, but it doesn't actually help sleep. It actually interrupts the cycles of sleep.
Makes you feel sleepy, but does not improve your sleep.
Yeah. So yeah, exactly. Ashwanga, everybody asks me about this, and I have never done research on it. I don't know why. Maybe I just can't type it into Google, but it's an adaptogen herb, right?
Right.
So
it's not well supported. I mean, none of them are really well supported for anything. They're just not well researched in general. So,
so he's got yogurt here now as well. Or do you want to talk more about Ashwagandha?
No, I don't. I don't recommend it, and that's kind of what I'll say. It's not well evidenced.
Yogurt, I don't know. Maybe that's a protein thing, actually. Maybe that goes to casein.
Yeah,
maybe the
casein,
reason that it's probably the casein in the yogurt that helps. Interesting thing with carbs, some people will find that they sleep better if they have a good carb meal for dinner. Other people will feel that they don't sleep. So it's worth experimenting, and you can try, if you've had a heavy training session, you may want to have carbs straight after your training session and then head to bed, or not. I actually now do a lot more of restricting carbs after certain training sessions, but that's a whole other topic. Okay, right. Anything more on that? Oh, the BPC 157. That's a peptide that people have been, I think, in the last maybe 10 years, have been using to try to inject into joints and cartilage and things for recovery. And I think there's some interest in it in terms of helping recovery, but I think that's really not. It's not really in our remit as in nutrition. So
nutrition does not involve injecting yourself with stuff, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you want to look at it.
Apart from B12 injections can be very helpful for people.
Yeah, but it's kind of a medical issue. Like they're not absorbing B12 from their gut, and they need to get it some other way. And intramuscular that happens to be that way. All right. Ready for the next question?
Yeah, go for it.
All right. This one's another question from Pavel Mentsentsev. What's your take on probiotics, and what's the cutting edge research on the matter? Lately, there's an increasing amount of noise around the topic and discussions about its importance, how overlooked it often is, and how individual microbiome makes everyone different. But the only interesting thing I came across is ZBiotics, which sells certain probiotics that help fight certain aspects of hangover. I would be interested to see if there's anything else that is tangible.
This is I think out of all topics, this is so huge. Probiotics really is not big. Like to put it in short, I've gone back and forth on probiotics. I tried various brand of specific probiotics, which was very expensive. It's like £100 for a jar. I tried soil-based probiotics, and what I experienced was what most of the research says is that there is an improvement in kind of gastrointestinal improvements. So you might have just more regular bowel movements, the consistency of bowel movements are better. You might have less IBS and things like that. Unfortunately, though, once you stop taking them, it tends to come back.
Yeah, the benefits disappear fast. I mean, the thing that you have to understand about probiotics is when you start taking probiotics, you're not actually colonizing your gut. Like you do for a very transient period of time, but what lives in your gut is influenced by what you eat, not by what the other cultures that you add. So you can like kind of bring some, certain gut bacteria on vacation in your gut, by continually taking it. But if you want a healthy gut, really the secret to it is diversity of foods and fiber and different types of fiber from different types of plants. That's what's going to really make a bigger difference on like what bugs are actually, what bacteria, I'm going to call them bugs because bacteria just feels, I don't want to say that over and over. What bugs live in your gut is what you're eating over and over. Like we do know that probiotics are like, if you're taking an antibiotic, probiotics are going to help you avoid the bad symptoms of, you know, getting your gut microbiome flushed out. You're not going to get as much diarrhea and other aspects. So there are times when it's important to take them. But otherwise, I don't think there's any research that's going to tell you that certain types of probiotics are going to be good at fighting things like hangovers. Like that's very specific, and that feels very much like a marketing claim. Kind of like the IV stations. I don't know if you have these in England, but we have like places in the US now that you can go give you like get hooked up to an IV and like get certain infusions of this or that. Like there's no evidence that any of those are going to do anything beneficial. Like if you're getting vitamin B, various B vitamins through a drip, it's not gonna, like, you should be getting these things from your diet, and most people are, and there's just no benefit to it. The benefit is you're getting some water directly into your system, as I am with this glass right now.
So I mean, I don't think what I'm not saying is, I'm not saying that probiotics are on the same level as supplementing L-arginine, right?
No. There's definitely benefits to probiotics in certain situations.
Definitely. I think that what is slightly annoying is that I think we assumed that we could recolonize our guts by taking probiotics, and I think this is the problem: is it doesn't seem to be so much the case. Now, what most of this comes from is that they'll look at a sort of healthy population or an isolated population like the Hadza tribes or something like that, and then they'll look at their gut biome versus, you know, the standard American diet eater, and they will see, okay, these gut biomes are very different, and this person's healthy and this person isn't. So if we were to change the gut biome by supplementing this person with these healthy lactobacillus and all this sort of stuff, then we could improve the health markers. And I think we do see that in some sense. But the problem is that it's like you want to attract a certain type of bird into your garden, and like you don't put any like food out and bird houses and the right plants, you know, or like you want to attract insects to your garden, but you don't have the same types of plants. You just have, you know, some flowers in a vase, and then the flowers die and then the bees go away. So I think the thing is that, you know, we by eating the diversity of food and not eating crappy food is where you are going to start making your gut look healthy, because that's really what's going on. I mean, there's some support for not like going crazy with sterilization of everything, you know, eating a bit of dirt, getting dirty, going outside, and things like that. Obviously, in the heyday of coronavirus, this is slightly poor, worse health recommendations. But in general, like, it appears that the people who grow up on farms and in kind of rural areas tend to be much healthier in terms of their guts, because they're just exposed to a whole bunch of stuff, and they pick up all these things, and you know, they're kind of more related to how we were as a species. So that, but I mean, there's a paper that I found which is fairly new, which is probably a good go, and it's by Casein and 2018, and it's called A Review of Probiotic Supplementation in Healthy Adults, Helpful or Hype, and that's European Journal of Clinical Nutrition, and that looks fairly substantial to read. But I think they had a little thing that says, so I said here, results suggest that probiotic supplementation in healthy adults can lead to transient improvement in gut microbiota, concentration of supplement-specific bacteria, Evidence also supports the role of probiotics in improving immune system responses, stool consistency, bowel movement, and vaginal lactobacilli concentration. There is insufficient evidence to support the role of probiotics to improve blood lipid profile. Consumption can improve in the immune, gastrointestinal, and female reproductive health systems in healthy adults. However, this review failed to support the ability of probiotics to cause persistent changes in gut microbiota or improve lipid health in healthy adults. The feasibility of probiotics consumption to provide benefits in healthy adults requires further investigation. So, yes, so potentially if you have gut issues, then maybe a specific strain of bacteria might help you get through that and improve things so that you can tolerate better foods and things like that and just improve your health. But that's something to speak to a dietitian who specializes in gut health and get tested for things like that.
Yeah.
Oh, in terms of things like kimchi and fermented foods, even those, depressingly, have not been the colonizing champions that we thought they were. Certainly eating them is good and it seems to help, but they're not the elixir of life. They're just kind of tasty and fun to eat. So yeah, so carry on eating them if you like them.
Yeah, there's certainly healthy foods. I would definitely recommend you eat fermented foods in your diet. It's a good source of it's nutritional. And good fiber. All right. Here's a few questions from Laura Shayana. A couple of them are about caffeine, and then the third one's about glycine. So the two caffeine-related ones are, you recommend caffeine as a good supplement for climbers, but what about its vasoconstrictive effect? I often have cold hands, which doesn't help, especially while climbing in winter, and I try not consuming too much caffeine, even though I like its boosting effect. And also, I am prone to tendinosis, and I've read on various websites that caffeine is not recommended when you have tendon injuries because it is acidifying. What do you think about this and about acidic alkaline diet in general? So maybe let's answer those first, and then we can talk about glycine next, because it's kind of not related to that question about caffeine at all. So caffeine is an adenosine receptor antagonist, which means that it's going to block the normal receptors that adenosine would bind to, and therefore, have an effect by inhibiting whatever adenosine's effects would be. And this is where it gets a little bit weird, because that's only one way that caffeine works. It also stimulates other things, other hormones that are going to have effects throughout the body. But kind of the bottom line is that even though caffeine does have some vasoconstrictive effects, the vasoconstrictive effects appear to be mostly in the cerebrum and kind of the heart area, and not in the peripheral tissue. In the peripheral tissue, it appears to have a vasodilatory effect. So it's increasing the size of the blood vessels. And it does this because caffeine also mediates epinephrine release, which is going to have a peripheral vasodilatory effect, because when you got epinephrine running, where are you shunting all the blood to your muscles? Your muscles want to be moving so that you can get away, and to move effectively, they need a good blood supply. And also, we already talked about nitric oxide, but caffeine itself appears to interact with the endothelial tissue, the smooth muscle of our blood vessels, and stimulate the production of nitric oxide, which is itself a vasodilatory agent. So you will find articles that talk about caffeine having a vasoconstrictive effect, because it does, but it affects different receptors in different parts of our body in different ways. In some of those receptors, it's going to have a vasoconstrictive effect, but in the ones that we're talking about for climbing, our muscles, it has a vasodilatory effect. So it should not interfere with, it should not make your hands colder in the winter, for example, because it's not going to block the blood flow to those muscles.
I found one paper that was about caffeine reduces myocardial blood flow during exercise. This is a 2013 paper.
Right. So the myocardial, we're talking about like the muscles of the heart, and that's one of the areas that has a vasoconstrictive effect. So we're not getting as much blood to the heart, to the muscles of the heart itself, or to the brain. But that's for most people, that's probably not going to be an issue. Like,
Yeah,
obviously, if you have some sort of coronary heart problem, something that where you need good perfusion to the vessels of your heart, to the heart muscle itself, then that's not something you want. But it's not going to make your hands cold having your heart vessels constricted.
Yeah, I mean, this paper was basically pushing on that high dose caffeine in young people or caffeine naive who are going to plan to exercise in the next hour might not be as so safe.
Yeah,
I would say, though, I mean, I didn't read the paper in super detail, but so it says in healthy individuals who perform aerobic exercise 1 hour after consumption of 200 to 300 milligrams of caffeine, which is about, an espresso is about 150 milligrams. A reduction in myocardial blood flow has been noted by indirect tests. So this was a kind of a warning paper, but I think if caffeine ingestion before heavy exercise or high intensity exercise was so prevalent in causing problems, I think we would have seen it by now, because it's so ubiquitous. If that's the right word. So I think if you I mean, there was one example they gave was energy drinks at a rave or something causing a heart attack or something. But I think I think it's basically, if you don't take caffeine normally, if you don't drink caffeine, then probably not good to just down a really high energy drink and then do really heavy exercise if that's not what you're used to. But it's probably not your heart is going to be the issue. It's probably going to be something else. But so, but do you want to talk about I've heard this before, but I've never looked into this. I think it was 2 papers that talked about tendons and ligaments and caffeine. And I remember somebody asked me over email once. So I don't know if you looked into it.
I haven't looked much into it. I can talk about like the acidic nature in general and whether that's
I can't remember what it was. I missed this when I was preparing. I missed to look this up again, but I don't think it's very strong. If it was strong, we'd have seen more research on it, and it would have been more thing. But no. But talk about the acidification.
I mean, caffeine has some, not caffeine itself, but the drinks that we consume caffeine within tend to have some organic acids in them, like chlorogenic acid in coffee, but none of them are particularly acidic compared to other things that we also commonly eat in our diet. And it's a little unfair to prod caffeine out in this. Like, no one's going to tell you like, well, don't have any lime on your tacos before you go climbing, because lime's very acidic and you're going to acidify your blood and have bad tendon problems. Our body's good at maintaining a blood pH right where it needs to be, and even better at like maintaining the pH of the various tissues in the various places it needs to be. You're not gonna, like, unless you have some severe metabolic issue going on, you're probably not going to influence the pH of your tendons by consuming something acidic, whether it's mildly acidic or strongly acidic. And that's kind of what I have to say about the acidic and alkaline diet in general, that we, like, some foods we eat, most foods that we eat are acidic, because alkaline, like, acidic has that nice kind of sour taste, and it's something that we actively seek out as humans. Like, it tastes nice to most of us, so we actively seek foods that are like somewhat acidic out. And like, you can even like look at culinary culture, and it's like kind of this offhand rule that, you know, if you feel like your meal's missing something, maybe you need to add something sour, something acidic. Alkaline, we do eat some alkaline foods, but alkaline is not something that we seek out because it tastes like soap. And soap is not a good taste. There are some foods that are like if you eat pretzels, those are boiled in a very strong, for us anyway, a strong solution of sodium bicarbonate. And that bicarbonate kind of gives that pretzel that its distinctive taste. Like if you're tasting it, you're like, why do pretzels taste like pretzels taste? It's because of the bicarbonate gives it that taste. And we appreciate it in that sense. But by and large, if something tastes alkaline, it kind of has that soapy taste and feeling. And we don't really enjoy that. So we don't seek it out. So alkaline it's a little strange that we have this, I don't want to call it a movement, but this fad or this dietary idea that we should be eating more alkaline foods, because most foods that we eat are not alkaline. And in fact, alkaline foods don't taste nice. So it kind of is suggestive, just from like a evolutionary biology standpoint, that we are literally enjoy the taste and crave the feeling of acidic foods, but not of alkaline foods. Alkaline foods we want to avoid. And
it's an interesting point, right? Yeah, it is an interesting point that if we crave this stuff at some level. So yeah.
And as far as like the effect on the body, again, like unless you have some metabolic disturbance, your body is going to compensate very easily. It's going to, you're not going to have a significant effect on your blood pH by eating more acidic foods or by eating more alkaline foods. So,
I think what I will say is, I mean, you basically you know, when you do eat a lot of alkaline stuff, like if you were supplementing bicarbonate or something, you could test your urine, and yes, your urine would be a lower pH.
Yeah, your urine is going to vary a lot depending on what you're eating and just what you're doing. But that's your urine.
Yeah, but your blood, not so much. I mean, again, if you want to improve your health, you know, eat a lot of fresh vegetables and fruits, and yes, that will have an impact on your overall what they call Prowl score, which appears to be somewhat beneficial. And I think it's mainly because you're providing substrates for in terms of performance, if you can augment that with the foods that you eat, and your body can then produce bicarbonates and things like that, then you're going to be able to perform, and you're going to be able to deal with the acidic buildup you would get during exercise. So that's one of the reasons for that. But I don't think there is a way, you know, an alkaline diet as such is going to be that beneficial. Also, I always wonder how many people on an alkaline diet or in that kind of community space also take apple cider vinegar.
It's true. I have certainly read, I haven't read them because I didn't feel like it was worthwhile, but I've seen articles with titles, suggestive titles that are like, apple cider vinegar is actually an alkalinizing agent, which is just like chemical nonsense. It's just nonsense. It's acetic acid.
The other thing that's slightly kooky about this, right, is that we walk around with a stomach full of battery acid.
We do. So it is so much more potent than any acid that we are going to eat.
I mean, the amazing thing about the stomach is the fact that the lining gets just regenerated constantly to buffer it from basically eating through our tissue. You know, so yeah, I mean, the big thing is that an alkaline diet, quote unquote, is going to be high in fresh fruits and vegetables and low in grains, and it's going to be lower in meat and dairy. But I think the problem is that the so-called health benefits of these alkaline diets is probably just because you're eating fresh whole foods?
It's not probably, it is 100% because you're eating fresh whole foods. I'm not even, there's things that I'll waffle about on and be like, yeah, you know, maybe it's this, maybe it's that. But here I can say, like, those fresh fruits and veggies that you're eating, they are acidic.
Yeah.
None of them are alkaline.
That's right. Okay. So this question is about glycine. At last, I consume glycine. I'm a vegetarian, hoping it will help my tendons recover. I have understood you are skeptical about this supplement. Do you think it's still a waste of time, even for vegetarians? Is that referring to you?
They're referring to me being skeptical of it, because I don't think that you've ever mentioned that you're skeptical of it. And in fact, you already mentioned that you take it. So
yeah, I'm a fan of glycine. I'm a big fan of glycine, and so the glycine is the primary amino acid in collagen, but glycine is involved with multiple pathways, everything from creatine synthesis to neurotransmitters and things like that. The debate is whether or not by taking glycine you actually increase glycine at all, or if you just metabolize it immediately for energy. So that's the big problem. However, many people who I've recommended trying 5 grams of glycine before they get into bed have said they have improved sleep. Now, whether this is because of its acute impact on GABA pathway and things like that, probably is the case.
Yeah.
So I don't think that having glycine, supplementing glycine, is necessarily going to increase glycine stores in your body. But one of the reasons why I like it is that it has multiple benefits. It's incredibly cheap. It tastes like sugar, so you can use it as sugar. One thing I don't understand why is confectionery companies and other people don't put glycine in their protein bars and things, because they could use it as raw, and it's healthy compared to sucralose and things like that. Maybe it's more expensive to produce or something. So what I do is I have glycine before bed almost every night that I remember to take it, with my pint of whey protein. And I like it, and I recommend it to people. It may be useful certainly for vegetarians, because it's a vegan, it can be vegan produced. So you can't, there's no such thing as vegan collagen, but you can get glycine. So for vegetarians, increasing glycine in your diet may actually be useful, including taking creatine, because creatine will spare glycine, because you get very little glycine, if any glycine, as a vegetarian and vegan. The only source of glycine is brown rice. That is going to be high amounts. And if you have brown rice protein powder, then you would get high amounts of glycine from that and proline. But other than that, you'll get very little glycine in your diet. And there's 2 amino acids that you find in a kind of balance in meat. So you'll find something called methionine, and in glycine. And what we tend to do is we eat a lot of muscle meats, like, steaks, and we don't eat much of the cartilage of animals anymore. So we don't make chicken broth and things like that as much. And so our diets tend to be much higher in this methionine and low in glycine, and these two have a kind of ratio and they interact with each other. So having glycine in the diet may improve that. That's one of the reasons why back 5-6 years ago, when collagen was all popular in paleo circles and Weston A. Price and all that sort of stuff, is because of that. Is they were saying have collagen every day because you will increase your glycine intake, which is beneficial for you. Now collagen has kind of went out of vogue and then came back into vogue in this kind of specific in a specific way during exercise. So by having collagen, you are increasing your glycine. But because I don't want to take collagen every day because it's just I have glycine, and maybe it's improving things, but it certainly helps with my sleep. So I think it's super harmless. I mean, the glycine can interact, so that they give mega doses of glycine. I think it's like 50 grams to people with schizophrenia, and it's been quite effective. So if people are taking 50 grams of glycine every day to help with their schizophrenia, taking 5 grams of glycine every day is probably not going to be a problem for you. I think that's that one.
Yeah. So here's one from Flea Low. Another question from Flea Low.
By the way, if anyone's still listening, if anyone's listening to this, I don't think we're going to chop this up into two podcasts. I think we'll just let it run, and you can just come in. I mean, we're at 2 hours and 40 minutes. So if you're hearing our voices and our energy slightly tapering, it's because of that. But we haven't got that long to go. We won't.
No. All right. So from Flilo, what are your rules about salt intake? That's probably one of the worst components of my diet. Do you have any rules about salt intake, Tom?
My only rule is that most people's salt intake is going to be high, probably if they eat a lot of processed food, and packaged food. But other than that, if you're having 3 meals a day and you're salting your food, you're getting in what I think is the safe range in the research, which is like 1.5 to 3.5 teaspoons per day of salt. So I have heard that the average American consumes 3,700 milligrams of sodium per day.
Yeah. And
this value has remained constant for the last 50 years, despite the rise in rates of high blood pressure and heart disease. So the point this author, Chris Kresser at the time, was saying is that salt's probably not the driver of high blood pressure and heart disease. It's probably what a lifestyle and food is. He put another comparison saying that the Japanese, with one of the highest life expectancies in the world, consume on average 4,650 milligrams of sodium per day. However, they have lower risk of cardiovascular disease, but also higher risk of stroke. So it's not a recommendation to have 4.6 grams per day of sodium. But I think the thing is that if you actually really dig into the salt literature, it seems to be a bit fairly dodge in terms of trying to understand really what is going on, and certainly restricting salt.
Really confusing about like we don't have, outside of like certain maybe, and I would even say in these maybe certain medical conditions, like I don't know, we're talking with athletes here in this moment, and you're going to be sweating out more salt than the average person. Your salt intake, more than any other person, legitimately needs to be higher, because if you're sweating out salt, you need to replace it, and you are going to be sweating out salt. Probably not copious amounts, probably not like if you were a cyclist cycling the Tour de France and you're just like buckets of sweat coming off of you. But I don't like Tom said, I don't want people eating all processed foods, and that's where most of your diet salt intake is going to come from. If you're eating mostly fresh foods, you're probably going to salt them to an appropriate level, because we don't like this taste of things that are hyper salty. That's not a pleasant taste. And so you're probably going to salt them, somewhere between a minimal to a moderate amount, whatever your personal taste preference for salt is. And you're probably going to end up, I would probably above what the US guidelines, and I'm sure the English guidelines and European guidelines are for how much salt you should be taking in per day is, but not by an excessive amount. And if you're the other values that, we're monitoring, like if you have no other risk factors for hypertension or for heart disease or for stroke, then that salt intake is not making a large impact on your health.
Yeah. I mean, the fact that he says it's probably one of my worst components of my intake, I wonder, where he's getting that from, because I think if you've got a salt grinder at home, you have rock salt and you grind it on your things. Have a look. If you just, grind it on an empty plate, have a look at how much salt you're actually getting with 3 turns of your grinder. It's still fairly low. I mean, if 1.5 to 3.5 teaspoons of salt per day is a recommendation, that's not, I mean, that's quite a fair bit. If you were to think that three teaspoons of salt, would you put a teaspoon of salt on every meal? I don't know, but I think I think it's unlikely unless you really are, snacking on a lot of salty products every day. Then maybe like pretzels and things like that, or popcorn or something. But I don't think it's such an issue. If anything, I would actually urge people to try, which I try. Goes back to my whey protein pint. Is that I now, when I leave to go to the gym, I go downstairs and go to my kitchen, and what I do is I get my grinder and I do a twist into my palm of my hand and then lick the salt up just before I go to the gym. And it's like, I don't know what it is, like a quarter of a teaspoon. And it's the same as I put in my sports drink.
Not a quarter of a teaspoon. That's so much. Yeah.
Well, you think a grind is more than a quarter of a teaspoon?
No, I think it's nowhere near a quarter.
Oh, well, yeah. So the point being is that, when you sleep, you sweat, and you may sweat out some sodium. So the two things I'm trying to put in is I'm having a pint of water, right? And I'm having a lick of salt. And I find that I should have like a salt lick, like the cows do, in my room. It's like,
oh. Next to the pint of whey protein.
So try. I mean, I would say that, and my sports drink recipe is 50-50 fruit juice, water, and a quarter of teaspoon of salt. That's the drink that I ask people to take with their climbing. So you might find actually, if you've been doing a heavy climbing session and have some pretzels, that's probably one of the better things you can do.
Yeah.
So Sophie's New Year. So Sophie's New Year. This is the name of the next question. She said she passed us a paper on vitamin D supplementation, and she said, "What is the thoughts on this article?" And to just summarize it quickly, supplementation with vitamin D 2,000 IU per day did not lead to significantly lower incidence of invasive cancer or major cardiovascular events than a placebo. The intervention also did not lead to lower incidence of total deaths from cancer or breast, prostate, colorectal cancer than placebo. Now, unfortunately, I didn't have a time to read this paper apart from just the abstract, but I think vitamin D supplementation in general is a kind of very big, complicated thing anyway.
Right. So vitamin D is, like, we call it a vitamin, but it's actually a hormone. We produce it ourselves, we synthesize it in our skin, and then it moves to general circulation and interacts with nearly every system in our body, as many hormones do. And so, like, this is one paper, and there has been a lot of research recently that shows that vitamin D is not beneficial in many of these broad categories, like cancer or cardiovascular disease. And, like, I would say that in general, the trend is that, like, 10 years ago, vitamin D was really hot, and it looked like, oh, maybe we should be increasing our guidelines, like, as to what the, like, acceptable range for a vitamin D blood test would reveal. And now it's a little bit less clear that that is what we should be doing. That doesn't mean that, like, again, there's just so many ways that it influences things. I would never recommend somebody do this for, like, a very specific reason, like to reduce the incidence of cancer or heart disease. Like, there's bigger, more important factors in that. And I would always recommend people that are, like, you should get a test done and see what your levels are. Because a lot of people, like, even if you're wearing sunscreen and you work in an office all day, it's not that hard to be at a deficient level. And supplementation does help prevent that.
Yeah, I think that's it. Is that, when I look at, it seems to be, there's a lot of research now when you look at different populations. There was a very recent one of people in Iran who are very deficient in vitamin D. And you see it in Australia too. And you would think, well, that's weird because these are really sunny countries. But no, but that's why they're deficient, because it's really sunny. And so people stay indoors because it's just hot and it burns. So those countries actually tend to have fairly low vitamin D status. So what I tend to recommend is, again, like, this is also the sort of thing of looking at one thing and saying, well, this vitamin didn't prevent all this stuff. And it's like, well, yeah, no doubt, because there's such a minute way of looking at things. Food is much more than just these, like, the little bits, and we can't just isolate stuff the whole time. So I don't think we're going to see this with any vitamin or mineral, that by supplementing this, it's going to make a big difference in terms of health outcomes. Yeah. It's the whole food, really. And it might sound boring, but it really is the whole food and the interaction between the components. In this case, it's actually getting outside into the daylight and into the sunshine. And, part of the health benefits of vitamin D might not even be the vitamin D, but the fact that you're out in the bright sunlight, and that can be affecting circadian rhythm. And the vitamin D is part of the reaction of being outside in the sun on your skin and the bright light in your eyes. So these things can't be isolated. That's being said, though, is that I recommend vitamin D supplementation to clients when I ask them about their lifestyle and they don't live in California or something, and they're not going outside. Certainly in Europe, this isn't a window with bright shining light coming into my face. This is an SAD light, which at nearly 11 o'clock at night is the worst thing I can do for my sleep, because it's totally throwing off my circadian. But yeah, so I think what you can do is vitamin D tests are actually pretty cheap nowadays. And you can normally buy a subscription, so you can get like 3 for whatever, £70 or something. And you can do that. It's a pinprick blood test, send it off, see what your status is, and then you can buy a vitamin D supplement, something like 5,000 IU per day, and then take that every day, and then get your blood test again and see where your levels are. It's incredibly safe and super, super cheap. And yeah, it may improve your health in just a general sense if you are deficient. So it's a bit like these sort of papers are a bit like look at the sort of papers that look at like fish oil and omega-3, where they suddenly say, well, this omega-3 doesn't do jack. And you're like, yes, it doesn't do jack when it's isolated like that. And it hasn't been the most promising that we thought it once was. But does that mean that we must just throw eating omega-3 rich foods out the window? No, not at all. Yeah. It's all part of everything. So yeah, vitamin D, get a test is super easy to do. You can do it. You don't need a GP to do it. You can just buy it online. So do that. I think is a good start. Do you know how to pronounce this?
I'm gonna give it a shot. How's that?
Yeah, go for it.
And
because he's actually a friend of mine on Facebook, because he runs a good Facebook group. He's a cool guy. I think it's a guy. I don't know actually, but we've had bits and pieces. He also translated one of my articles, I think, into French or something like that. Yeah. But anyway.
So this comes from À Portée de Doigt.
Nice.
And maybe, I don't know, it's like the blind man commenting on the beauty of my art.
Do you know what that actually even means?
Something about fingers.
Yeah, Deutsch. Okay, yeah.
So he writes, glad you're back, guys. It's been a long time for sure. We were missing your wisdom. My question is, aside from proper recovery and sleep, how could nutrition speed up the skin recovery process? And another one, more personal guess, any advice on special diets after meniscus surgery to help the healing process? Thanks, mate.
Okay, one, have you changed your mic?
I didn't change it. It just dropped down.
That's fine. Okay, that's fine. It was a little bit muffled.
Sorry.
Food for skin, or is he asking for other stuff?
How could nutrition speed up the skin recovery process?
I think you're looking at just a consistent protein intake is probably the biggest thing. Yeah. There is some research saying that collagen supplementation appears to be improving skin. So yeah, if you have money to burn on collagen, then you buy collagen, but don't buy those little bottles that are like £12 for 3 bottles. Yeah, I'm not going to mention the name of the company, but they must be making a fortune. They're selling you like pig skins.
Right. So Yeah, like skin is the again, like the primary protein in it is collagen, kind of like the tendons. But unlike the tendons, our skin is very well perfused, which is why if you just poke yourself very lightly, it's very easy to draw blood from your skin. So we don't have the same issue with like getting nutrients to the skin that we do with tendon, which is important because tendon should stick around for a long time, whereas skin is constantly being renewed because we're constantly rubbing it off.
Mm-mm.
But yeah, protein is really, like, I'd say, like, maybe collagen will make a difference, but here with skin, I would really just stray much more onto make sure you're getting adequate protein.
Yeah.
Because you have a lot of protein turnover on your skin. And like whenever we're talking about protein, like we kind of naturally focus in on the muscles because that's what is most important. Like kind of large scale thinking wise when we're talking about sports nutrition. But protein supports all of the proteins in your system. It's not just the muscles, it's also like the proteins that make up your kidney and make up your blood cells and make up your skin. So, and you need to support all of that. And as a climber, it's probably, minutely larger. It's not going to be like tremendously so, but because you're going through so much more skin protein, it does have an effect on how much protein you need.
Yeah, and I think this pushes on the point. I know there's certain communities that will look at, so vegan vegetarian communities will a lot of times push on the point that you don't need that much protein, and that's true. And I know that one of the stupid things that omnivores do is keep pushing on the fact that you don't get enough protein in a vegan vegetarian diet, which is not true. But the thing is that sometimes it goes the other way when the community will say, well, you only need this much protein, so stop harping on about getting more protein. But the point is that if you're a climber, like, you should default, if anything, to be having too much protein because your turnover is so high, right? There's no harm. And when I mean too much protein, I mean like 2 grams per kilo body weight, or like 2.3 grams per kilo body weight. So I'm not talking much more than like 200 grams for an 80 kilo climber. I mean, that's a lot of protein. But the point is that if you're like a 60, 70 kilo climber and you're eating 150 grams of protein, which would, be the high end, this is not a problem. This is going to be a good thing. So, I wouldn't skimp on the protein if you can for that reason, because maybe your needs are more than others. I don't know. I mean, there's lots of topical things that people put on their skin, hyaluronic acid and things like that. Whether that actually has an impact, I don't know, really. I would think the other thing, just the practicality, would be like anything, that if your climbing training is not allowing you to recover your fingertips, then maybe you need to look at your climbing training. Is it, and try and make some sort of sacrifices somewhere else, and maybe change the type of climbing that you're doing. I remember when we had new like box volumes put up in the Arch volume, the Arch Climbing Center here, that was so much fun because they were just so bizarre to climb. And like after a week, I just had no hands left because it was just sandpaper, right? The texture stuff. And then I remember when like one fingertip started to actually become so thin that it was bleeding. I was like, okay, look, you need to stop coming like 2 days in a week to do this thing. Like, just leave it. And it was annoying because it took me like 2 weeks, I think, to get those tips back. But that's all I can say, is that probably you just have to do general skin care. I don't think you can speed it up, really. I think just a healthy diet and typical recovery strategies are going to be the best way. And I think that's the same as his meniscus surgery. So it's the same thing.
It's the same thing. You need protein and you need calories also. Like it's kind of counterintuitive, I think, for some people, because you're used to exercising a lot and then you get an injury of some sort and you're like, oh, well, now I'm not exercising, I need to cut my calories down. And you might need to cut them down compared to what you were doing, but they're still elevated compared to what a sedentary day would be.
Yeah.
So make sure you're still eating enough calories that you're actually supporting that healing process.
Yeah. So one way it could be easy is that, say you have a certain diet that has a lot of carbs in on your heavy training day, and then you hurt yourself and then you're not training. What I would do is you could cut the carbs down a bit and then just have an extra protein meal. So you bump your protein up by, say, 30 grams of protein. Like, say you do the pint in the morning or the pint of whey, in the evening. Yeah, that could be a very good strategy, because you just know that you're upping your calories by 200 or so, 300 calories per day, but it's of protein. So, and we know that protein is the least fattening of macronutrients, because your body just burns it differently and upregulates. So that's probably a good way of just substituting, have more protein in place of the carbs when you're injured, and you get more calories and more protein in both. Double whammy.
Yeah.
Nearly there.
Yep. We got a bunch of they're shorter in length and maybe in answering. We'll see.
Okay. Shall I do it? Go Scott Walker. He says, I would be interested in any nutritional training advice, adjustments for still making progress when working shifts, days, evenings, and midnights in a given week. So I think this is a tricky one, because I think it goes again to the kind of circadian thing. It's really difficult to try and get a good sleep and recovery schedule in place when your day is not your day the same way. I don't have a lot in there. I think have a look at there's a lady, if you don't know, called Rhonda Patrick, and she's done a lot of stuff on circadian rhythms. So search Rhonda Patrick circadian rhythms, shift work. She has done some podcasts with, I knew his name and now it's dropped out of my head. But that is that in general. But in terms of specific nutrition adjustments, nothing really. I think you just got to eat in line with the shift pattern that you're on. So if you're working night shifts, then you shift everything to be that your day starts at whatever it is, 8 o'clock at night. So try and have a big bright light in your room when you wake up. Eat most of your food and your carbs and things like that in the first part of the day, or in your day as the shift, and then taper it as you go towards bedtime, and then flip it around. But just try and do everything you can to tell your body that this pattern that I'm in now is actually daytime, to the best of your ability. But that's, it is tough. I mean, I did 5 or 6 years of night shifts in IT, and it was absolute hell. So, but some people have to do that. So, I think that's really it. I think just watch yourself and also watch yourself on the transition. So don't suddenly, it's probably not wise to suddenly try and do a lot of stuff when you're switching out from days to evening. So I don't have anything unless you have any more specifics on that, but it's a really hard one for people, I know.
Yeah. So this question's from Sam Clark. He writes, your views on meal structure for climbing trips would be interesting. I am currently on a 2-week sport climbing trip in Italy, eating like a horse at my evening meal in an attempt to recover for my next climbing day, but wondering how much it's actually helping. Well, it's helping. I'll say that. Like your trip, like how your diet's going to look in your trip is going to be pretty specific to where you're climbing, like how much, what the volume is, and just what you can bring with you to the crag. I would always recommend like trying to eat more balanced throughout the day, like trying to get the calories throughout the day, because especially if you're climbing for hours at a time, like you have limited stores of glycogen, you're going to start exhausting those, and you're going to get exhausted sooner than you would, even if you're eating a huge meal at night. But after that consideration, like it's really just getting the calories in, whether that means eating like a horse at night or, eating like some goats throughout the day.
I don't think he's eating a horse.
No. I know he's eating like a horse. I'm saying like, like you can eat like a horse at night, or you can like have a smaller appetite, like a small goat.
That's true. Yeah, I mean, I think I don't know why I must be being paid by Big Protein, but everybody, I always recommend them taking a whey protein supplement on a climbing trip. Suddenly when they go to somewhere like a bouldering
And a
trip,
pint glass.
suddenly when they go on like a bouldering trip in like Font or something, Fontainebleau, because most people are just going to be eating like bread and cheese and stuff. So I'm like, if you can just wake up and have a whey protein shake in the morning and have one in the evening, that's like between 40 and 60 grams of high quality protein that you're putting into your trip every day. So that's, and it's light and it's super easy to carry. So that's a good strategy. In terms of the actual climbing, yeah, I think you've got to think about in terms of how comfortable it is in your stomach. So, if, you need to test the sort of foods that you like to eat. So if you can carry stuff in your gut, before you're climbing, if you're doing multi-pitch or something like that, then you need to be aware of what you can eat. Most of the people I've worked with who've done multi-pitch, they've kind of experimented with carrying very snacky things. So it might be like little salami sticks and protein bars and like candy during the climb, which they can carry and just snack on. One girl I know, Minna, she took like, I think it was like candy cane or something, and she snapped it into little chunks and actually had it in her sports bra so that as she's going up, she can just like suck on a little candy as she goes up. So that's a good idea. And then, yes, you probably are going to be eating bigger in the morning and in the evening, because you're not going to be carrying that much food and stuff. So what I'd do is with that sort of thing, I think it's worth just speaking to people who've done it and just finding what foods sit well in your stomach for that. Yeah. Eric Jerome, he says, how to structure cutting weight hard, specifically in regards to planning for performance periods and training cycles.
Hard is it's a vague word.
Yeah. Does he mean fast, maybe?
I assume, like trying to cut a lot of weight really quickly. I don't really recommend like cutting a lot of weight in a really quick fashion. Like, even if you have, like, maybe you're 15 pounds above what you think your ideal weight for climbing is going to be, like, I would say take it, like, make your process is going to be a few-year process maybe instead. Like, you're not at a weight that's really holding your climbing back as much as you think it is. And you're going to be able to make the shift not only safer, but just easier and more naturally, and be able to hold it. If you maybe cut, like if you take 3 months or 2 months and you lose, instead of trying to lose 15 pounds in that period, if you just aim for 5 pounds, and then you sort of you cut off that and you maybe taper back up a little bit, but then the next year you can taper back down just a little bit more, and you slowly wind your way down.
Yeah, I mean, there's two things I think with this. There is a kind of acute polishing your weight before an event or like a performance or like a climbing trip, which is debatable whether that is useful or not. And then there is cutting weight in a general sense. So I think, yes, if you are a heavier climber, say you're new to climbing, or you just have you're just a much bigger build in terms of fat mass than the average just hobby climber or something. I'm specifically not saying numbers. Is that, yes, to try and look at it as a long run. I had a lady who's come to work with me who is about 30%, and she said, how could I get down to 22%? And I said, this is going to be a couple of years. you are rate limited how much fat you can actually metabolize. So one of the things I do with clients is I actually give them an expectation. I use a calculator to show them what could be possible so that they understand and realize what actually is possible to do. In terms of rate of weight loss, it really depends on two things. One, how much your life is going to suck during that weight loss. Because we have some research and we know that you can push to like 1.4% of your body weight per week and still maintain your muscle mass and your performance. That would be a high rate of weight loss. You won't make progressive gains in your performance and training at that rate of weight loss. Oh, rate of weight loss. It's getting the end of the day. So what I actually do with people is, depending on where they are, I will go from 0.5% to 0.8% to 1% and maybe 1.2% body weight loss per week, right? So the difference is that if I have someone who we have a very specific time that they're going to go climbing, let's say Italy, what I do is I will always give 2 weeks before the trip that they will eat to be nourished and recovered. So there's no dieting, there's no restriction, 2 weeks before they travel out.
Yeah.
And then I work backwards from there, and I will do diet cycles. And I normally do roughly 11-day diet cycles with a 3-day break. It's just called calorie cycling, basically. I just find it a simple way of doing it. And what I do is I then will say, okay, how structured is this person's lifestyle? How good are they with tracking? Are they the sort of person who likes numbers, et cetera, et cetera? Mm-hmm. With that sort of person, which I can tell very early on, then for me to say to them, okay, I want to shoot for this 1% body weight loss per week. And I'm talking about people who are generally already lean and they're kind of trying to put polish on for a specific project, right? Then because this is the interesting thing, is that you'll find that people who tend to be lean tend to be doing a lot of this automatically already, if not sometimes in excess, and which is a lot of people now. But point is let's say I've got somebody who's in a good healthy state now, and they've got a good relationship with food, they've got a good relationship with their body, and they're very good at tracking and controlling food, and their life is low stress, etc. Then I will go, great, what we could do is we could shoot for the hard fast, because we've got, let's say, 30 days to do a weight loss, and we could really do a lot if we get this right. So we'll say, let's shoot for this like 1% body weight per week, because most of the time they're going to drift into like 0.7%, right? So that's fairly hard cut, and it's fairly hard because it'll be about 500 to 600 calories missing from their diet per day to get that rate. So that would be how I do it. And it depends on the person. If I have someone who has a high stressed, their life doesn't allow them to do that so well, then there's no point me asking them to shoot for a hard weight loss, because they're not going to do it, and they'll be very motivated to do it for like 4 days, and then something will happen and they'll just go and eat something like loads of pizza or whatever, and then the whole thing just restarts back and forth. Yeah. So if I would say to them, well, let's choose a diet rate that actually you can do and it doesn't suck so much, and it just feels like 9 out of 10 times you're hitting the targets that allow us to get the weight loss, because it's easy. That and I actually put this on Instagram the other day, and it was about what I'd said to this client was the rate of weight loss might not be mathematically as fast as it could be, but you're going to be doing it faster because you'll be able to do it every single day, versus me giving you a really hard cut that you fail 6-7 times out of 10 to get. Right. So I think that's it. So my 2 rules would be if you're in terms of the direct question, I think if you are now in a performance phase, you need to try and explain what you mean by performance. Is it like performance in a competition or performance sending a project? Because that's different than saying performance pushing your metrics or trying to get the best out of your training sessions, because then you need to structure it differently, because then you really need to make sure that you are very dialed in with the types of foods that you're eating to maximize your training, even though you have very little food. And that's probably going to be something like a fairly low fat diet and trying to keep the carbs as high as possible. And so, for instance, with this person I'm doing a hard diet with, their fat has dropped down quite considerably. And the only carbs that they have, because I don't try to reduce carbs at all when I do weight loss, because otherwise it just mucks around with water, is I say, right, the carbs that we do have, you just place this around your training. So you're having carbs before, carbs during training, and whatever you have left, then you can fit that in how you like during the day. But once you start squeezing food, the last thing you want to start doing is pulling out the foods that allow you to train harder, which is going to be your carbohydrates. So yeah, you gotta figure out, work backwards from the goal. If you're trying to improve your training, then choose your diet strategy and make sure that you are recording how your training is going. And if you're noticing that your recovery and your training sucks, then you need to choose what is a higher priority: losing that body fat and sucking in your training for whatever 3 or 4 weeks or more, or doing a slower diet but making progress in your training at the same time. So yeah. But there's a lot with that. But that, I mean, that's why I'm doing this now full time, because this is actually a very fascinating thing to do with people, because it's a hell of a lot more than counting calories. It's understanding, what you can do in the life that you have and the stresses that you have and the food choices you like and the relationship you have with your partner and the meals and what performance means to you and stuff like that. So
yeah,
it's a cool thing.
All right. This question comes from Will Clifford 1. Thoughts on eating strategies for early morning exercise? I lift weights first thing, 5 a.m., a couple of times a week, and wondered if I should load on carbs the night before or try and eat first thing. Currently, I have a large coffee and eat only after training, which lasts for a couple of hours. Thanks. You can't make yourself want to do something first thing in the morning. So if I wake up, like I mentioned earlier that, I'm waking up early to go to the gym before school, which means very early for me. And I'm not going to eat at that time in the morning. My stomach does not feel ready to eat at that point. So I have a protein shake and I go to the gym and I eat my breakfast afterwards, when I'm sitting in class. And I don't worry that that's going to affect my performance, because what I'm doing during that time, I know that I have the muscle glycogen stores to perform, and that I will recover them afterwards. There's no real reason to carb load the night before. You're not going to have any blood glucose. Your blood glucose isn't going to be elevated by the time you get to the gym. So you don't have like that benefit that maybe you would have if we eat an hour or 2 hours before we go to the gym, then we have that elevated blood glucose and we can potentially use it and have better performance during our session. You're not going to have that if you eat a meal the night before and then go to sleep and sleep on it. And you don't need a carb load, because hopefully throughout the rest of the day, like after that session, you're still eating normal foods and you're going to be recovering that glycogen. We have had studies that essentially show that as long as you're not exercising, again, using the same muscles within the next 8 hours, that your normal diet is almost always adequate to recover the muscle glycogen that you've lost during that workout. So especially like if it's 24 hours later, as long as you're eating a regular diet, chances are you've recovered the glycogen you need to use and you're going to be ready for the next session.
Yeah, exactly. I think the only thing is, if you're on a kind of low carb diet and for whatever reason, and your morning training session is, specifically demanding, then you need to just be aware of where you're placing your carbs, and then figuring that out, seeing if you're not running too low on that. But you can do, if it's a gym session, you really don't need to eat anything. So yeah, I mean, then the post workout is probably more important. But again, like the Whey
pint glass next to the bathroom sink.
Exactly, it's super easy.
Yeah.
So this is the third one from Pavel Matsentev. What's your take on individualized nutrition? This subject also appears to be in a spotlight lately, ranging from DNA-based tests to determine individual food compatibility to simple blood sugar tests to see reaction to particular types of foods. Do you think there is a lot of potential behind it? Do you think getting must be a continued glucose monitor to monitor the sugar levels makes sense?
What do you think, Tom? I'll let you answer this one first.
Well, yes, individual nutrition, yes. But individual nutrition doesn't need to be so... I don't think you need to be super specific, because, again, I don't know how much that's actually going to benefit you. I think you tend to know. I had somebody today who was asking me about, should I eat brown rice or these brown wheat wraps? And I said, well, the brown rice might have more nutrition than the wraps. And then he said, oh, but interesting, whenever I have pizza, I get really bad gas and stomach and stuff. So I said, well, maybe you don't deal with wheat so well. So why don't you try the wraps and see how your gut is? And if there's no problem, then that's great. But if you do notice there's a problem, then maybe just don't have the wraps and have the rice instead. So I think that on that level, there's the individualized thing, and that's individual to the person because they're trying their own stuff. And then we get the kind of the scientific stuff of testing. I think the DNA-based tests, somebody said, and I can't remember who it was, but somebody said that DNA-based nutrition testing is like astrology for nutrition. Yeah.
Yep, that's what I was going to bring up.
Oh, do you know who said that?
I don't remember what article it was in, but it might have been in the Atlantic. Anyway, yeah, that's kind of the issue, that there might be some potential there. There might be some promise in the future, but where we are right now, like, we can't tell you anything meaningful from a DNA test about what your diet should look like. Mm-hmm. And anything that a DNA test does tell you about what your diet should look like, they made up. They essentially just made it up, which is what the link to astrology is. Like, they got like this one little sign and they're like, oh, and that means that you don't tolerate plums very well. Yes. You're like, but that doesn't, like, we don't actually have any testing that says that. This is just like a weird interpretation of a specific sign that, we got. Maybe one day, like, I doubt we'll ever be able to tell somebody whether they tolerate plums or not specifically, but for larger scale strokes, we might be able to tell somebody how much protein they specifically need, from a meal. Like, that's something I could anticipate we one day will be able to do. Or like how, rapidly they digest certain types of carbohydrates. There's places that we can certainly get a little bit better information from a DNA test one day. We're just not there yet. And I don't think we're going to be there for a long time. We don't even know, we can't even predict how tall somebody will be based on, like, we can make a very, very, very general prediction about how tall somebody will be based on their DNA. Telling somebody what their diet should be is so much more complex. And yeah. I mean, as for what's that?
No, I was just thinking the only thing I would say is some of the stuff on like methylation and things like that, whether or not there is polymorphisms that can impact things, and whether or not you should be supplementing certain methyl donors and things like that. So there might be something to that on that level. But I think the kind of the marketed DNA tests, and also for the training stuff, like sports DNA tests to say, well, you have a DNA profile of a sprinter rather than an endurance athlete. I find this kind of funny because I think this is probably telling you what you already know. because I don't think there's many people who are like doing power-based sports that will do a DNA test and then they say, oh, by the way, you have the profile of an endurance athlete.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah.
So I think there may be promise of this, and certainly individualized medicine and things like that will certainly be in the next 30 something years.
Yeah, individualized medicine before individualized nutrition. But that's like that's so much different in some ways, because we're talking about introducing these molecules, these drugs that will bind to very specific sites. It's just so much more specific than nutrition is.
Yeah. The continuous glucose monitor. Have you ever been curious to do that?
Have I?
Yeah.
No.
Oh.
No.
I have, but every time I look at it, I'm like, it's going to be £50 for the device and then like £20 for the little disc.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, no, don't spend money on that. Because what does it? I mean, so the continuous glucose monitor is what it sounds like. It just monitors your glucose constantly. So you could potentially see what foods raise your blood glucose, whether your exercise lowers it. You kind of where you are basally. And the question is, though, with a lot of this stuff is like, if someone said to me, should I get a glucose monitor? And I'm like, okay, so what do you currently eat? And they're like, this and this and this and this. And I'm like, well, those are kind of high carby foods, and you're snacking on it the whole day. Do you need a glucose monitor to tell you that that's probably not the best way of doing it? And also the other thing as well is that like there's this assumption that if you eat a meal of something and your blood glucose goes up, normal levels, that this is necessarily an indication of poor health. Yeah. I don't know if that's so thing. It's the same as the people who talk about constantly trying to keep insulin as low as possible.
Right.
There is some truth in that, yes. And this is the benefit of probably not snacking the whole way through the day. But yeah, I don't know, apart from whether you are at risk of diabetes or complications or something like that, then if you have money to burn, then yeah, do it because it might be interesting and you might discover something and you might be like, oh, I didn't realize that my blood sugar was much higher after eating white rice than it is after eating white bread. Yeah. So maybe I could eat more, I don't know, bread than rice. I don't know, but yeah, I don't think what I'm saying is I don't think this sort of data actually allows you to make that good application in life.
Right. Like that's the question. What would a continuous glucose monitor do to change your performance or change your lifestyle? Like, I mean, as Tom said, a lot of these things we kind of already know. We don't need a continuous glucose monitor to tell you that white rice is going to cause a bigger spike than like salmon, which doesn't have any, of course. So, we know. So how is it actually going to change your diet?
Well, yeah, I think we're both dying. So I think that's it. I think this sort of information, and this actually trickles now into this next question. This is the second last question. And this is from Will Clifford 1. And he says, thoughts on heart rate variability as an indicator for if you can perform / back off overtraining, etc. You reference an article you have on this a couple of times in early episodes, but I can't find them on your site. Yes, in 2016, which was apparently a very good year for writing articles, I spent a good couple of months reading up on heart rate variability because it was again in vogue at the time, and it was very impressive. And I had that on my website. And then when I moved to making my new website, I didn't convert it. And so actually the other day I pulled it up and reconverted it, and it's back on my website with a little caveat at the top. And with heart rate variability, go to my website, useful.coach, and you'll see there's an article called Heart Rate Variability for Training, And quite simply, heart rate variability is the beat-to-beat variability of your heart. So you don't want your heart to be beating like a metronome. You want it to be able to vary. The space or the time between each beat wants to vary. And you got to think of it in terms of how responsive your nervous system is. So if your heart is very variable, it means it can beat fast or slow very quickly, switch back and forth and vary depending on the activity that you're doing. So the point of this is that it's like a parasympathetic sympathetic balance. If you're very stressed and you're under a lot of pressure, etc., your heart will be much more consistent. It will be less variable, because it's like your nervous system is just driving your heart to be beating. It doesn't matter how relaxed you might be at home, but your heart is basically saying that you are still in the office and you have tasks to finish, etc. So what the thought was that what you could do is you can measure your heart rate variability every day, and you would be able to see the state of your nervous system. And that is true. And you can see the state of your nervous system by doing it. Unfortunately, it is also very prone to it can be interfered with very quickly. So you have to, for instance, if you're taking heart rate variability, you have to choose whether you're going to do it standing or lying down. You can't go back and forth between them. You've got to make sure that you do it in the kind of same setting. So as you get up, you go to the loo, sit down, do your test. You can't suddenly do it at, in the morning one day and then in the afternoon the other day. So kind of long story short, read my article because it's very thorough. But the problem is that we thought it would be really good, and it appears to be useful for seeing trends in endurance athletes. So when you do heart rate variability testing with an endurance athlete every single day, and they're training and they're doing long endurance, you can kind of see a trend of heart rate variability going down as they start getting close to overtraining or under recovery. And so what you could potentially do as a coach is say, okay, maybe we need to back off here because you're not getting the recovery response that we need. However, it doesn't necessarily mean that person can't perform. And this is kind of muddying it. The other problem is that in power sports, this doesn't seem to be helpful at all, is that it's so back and forth that it doesn't really show you much. And there's another one issue with it, is that when I first started doing it, that's how I got involved with the Team GB people, because I actually sent a bunch of Team GB guys I knew heart rate variability apps because I wanted to see if they could do this. And a few of them did it for me. And I realized the problem with heart rate variability when one of the guys was going to a world championship in the next couple of weeks. And I deliberately told him not to track his heart rate variability for 3 weeks leading up to his competition. And the reason I did that was because the last thing I want to tell this young guy is for him to look in the morning at his heart rate variability and the variability to say, oh, you under recovered.
Yeah.
And then he goes into his competition. He's like, oh, fuck this. Oh, sorry. It's the first time I've sworn on this podcast.
Oh, my goodness.
Oh, no. We have to
think of the children, Tom.
We're going to have to put an explicit thing on this now. Anyway, I'm tired. I'm super tired now. Anyway, the point being, it is nearly 12 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
The point being is that this could be in a placebo effect. Suddenly your app suddenly tells you that you're under recovered. And guess what? You're probably going to perform worse. And what's happened, and this is why we tied into the previous question, is that heart rate variability testing tends to tell you what you already know. It's the same as sleep tracking. When you wake up in the morning and your sleep thing says, you didn't sleep very well last night, you're like, well, I know. So it's like, what do you do with this information? Heart rate variability is very cool. It's used a lot in medical settings and is a kind of extra thing that they put in tests, in research. But I found, and this was after I've done a podcast. There's a whole podcast I did with 3 heart rate variability app producers, the 2 main ones that I did. And at the end, it was very exciting but I don't think it really panned out as the kind of way to monitor your training overload. I think what's actually better is literally the notes that you keep in your journal, and notice, for instance, track the RPE of the rating of perceived exertion on certain exercises. Let's say a squat. Say on Tuesday, you do your squat and it's like a 7 out of 10 in terms of how hard it was, and then throughout the week the weight's not changing or whatever, but you suddenly have like a 9, but the weight's only gone up, let's say 5 kilos or whatever. Then something's going on there. Like, what's going on in your life that session felt super hard for you. Mm-hmm. Then you maybe can start looking at other things. So it's good. Again, as I say with everything, if you have money to burn, then get one. You can get free heart rate variability stuff, and it's fascinating. It sometimes tells you interesting things like oh, maybe you need to pull back a little bit because you seem to just be more stressed in general every morning. But I tell you, one of the most stressful things, and this happens with every single app almost, one of the most stressful things is when the heart rate strap or the device doesn't pick up your heart rate. Is that you sit there and you've either got your finger on the camera or you've got the strap on, or your finger in a little device, and you're like, oh, I'm going to take my HRV, and you take it, and then it says like error reading, and then so you do it again, and it's like can't find the heart rate, so you re-put the strap back on, and then you put your finger in, and then it doesn't take it again, and then it takes it, but then it interrupts halfway through, and then you wonder when it finally takes the heart rate variability reading whether it's totally wrong because you're now really pissed off by not getting right.
Yeah. Did it just make it up? Did the machine give up at some point? It was like, you know what? You seem to be, you really want this, so I'm just going to give you a readout. All right. You happy? You got a number.
Yeah.
Leave me alone.
But yeah, it's cool. It's a cool thing. Look at it's fairly cheap to do. Look at my article. But yeah, I certainly don't think it with climbers actually. I don't think it gives you that much. I think there's probably better ways to do it.
Yeah. All right. Last question. This one comes from Handful of Blair, which is I like that tag. That's a good little name. I assume it's Instagram. We had another question. Anyway, what are the specific differences between the adaptation you get from cardio and spending time at altitude? I think you covered this topic, but it was vague on this specific question. So spending time at altitude, you're going to get kind of a general hypoxia leading to, greater. I guess there's two things. So first, you'll have the kind of the hypoxic effect in creating more red blood cells. That's a longer term adaptation. And then in the short term, you'll increase production of this chemical called 2,3-BPG or bisphosphoglycerate, which essentially it regulates how easily your hemoglobin or your red blood cells will release the oxygen to tissue. Because that's tightly regulated. We don't want our red blood cells to release the oxygen easily because then it's not going to make it that far. But we also don't want it to hold on to it so tightly that it never lets go of it. So initially, when you go to altitude, you get that increase in 2,3-BPG. You release the oxygen a little bit easier to the tissue. That way, you kind of temporarily can increase how much oxygen you deliver to it, and then long term, you're going to get the red blood cell production. For exercise, you still get that hypoxic effect, and you will produce more red blood cells as a result. I don't think there's as much of a 2,3-BPG increase, although I haven't actually specifically seen what that is. But more importantly, when you exercise, you also build mitochondria in your muscles. And that's probably the bigger influence on why, like, you can have a person training for marathons at low altitude and then do fine at high altitude. But you can't just take a person who's lived at 14,000 feet for their entire life and take them down, but never exercises, and take them down to sea level and have them run a marathon, because they still, like, even if they have great oxygenation capacity within their blood, their ability to use that oxygen from in the muscles is still low.
Yeah, and then you have obviously the heart, actually training the heart to pump and to deliver the oxygen,
Right.
So yeah, I don't have much more to say on that, to be honest. I think
Yeah. I mean, I think like we say train low, recover high, because the idea is you will get a better boost in red blood cell production if you're recovering at altitude. But you'll be able to train harder and make better muscular adaptation if you're training not at altitude. That's obviously not a reality for most people. Most of us are going to train and recover at whatever altitude we happen to live at. And we don't have pressure chambers or the ability to travel, up 5,000 feet for recovery after we do our training. But just in general, like you'll have better red blood cell. You'll have more red blood cells just in general from altitude. But if you want adaptation as far as like doing cardio better, you need to do the cardio itself. That's the only way you're gonna get the muscular adaptation. And the muscular adaptation, I think, is ultimately more important than the red blood cell count. Like that's important, but you're going to get both from the cardio training. You're only going to get the red blood cell count at altitude.
Yeah, and just think of it in terms of what's happening locally. If you're exercising a muscle, if we just look on a muscle level, that continuous exercise, so the endurance level of it or the acute intensity of it, causes there to be a deficit in oxygen and a deficit in fuel, substrates, and things like that, and a buildup of byproducts that are signaling that you're in this side of the training, that this, and that's what causes the adaptation. Your muscles like, well, we need to do the work, but we don't have the oxygen available to do the work.
Yeah.
Or we're working for such a long period of time that we have to make it more efficient because we only have a certain amount of fuel, and that's why we'll upregulate. Because if you think about it, mitochondria are, as any textbook says, like the powerhouses of our cells.
Right.
And the reason that we develop more of them is because we need more power, right? So that's why when you exercise, it drives mitochondrial growth, because it's like the body is saying, well, the brain is picking up, and the local cells are saying, oh, well, we have to do the work because we're being asked to do the work, but we don't have the machinery in place. So let's put the machinery in place, which is why, for instance, if you don't do any training, you lose the mitochondria. Your body will always be the most efficient with energy. So it will get rid of what it doesn't need. So on local sides, that's what's happening, obviously, when you do training. But when you're spending time at altitude, you just have less oxygen available full time, but that will affect things in a different sense. But I assume there's like two sides of the same coin. But yeah, I don't know that much on this at all. But
yeah. All right, we did it. It only took about 4 hours.
Yeah, 3 hours and 42 minutes.
I think I've seen your stubble grow while we did this.
Yeah, I can, as people might have heard in my voice and if you looked at me on the camera, I was drifting off the side of my chair. Yeah, it's late. It's like 23:50 here. This was not a good idea to do so late. But yes, I can't imagine us doing this in I don't know why I'm telling you, because you'll hear it, but I'm not going to chop this into
tired.
I'm not going to chop this into two pieces. I don't think you can just listen to half of it. And if you never hear me talking now, it means that you gave up halfway, and there could be like a secret thing I could tell you. But
exactly. Yeah.
It's super great to catch up with you, Brian.
Yeah, you as well, Tom. It's been good to get another episode out. I was excited about it, and it's good. It's good. And hopefully, we can do another one sometime soon, sometime before a year. That's my bar. That's my bar. Right. I
think what we need to do is that we'll chat behind the scenes and think of something that would be a good thing to spend some time researching and then release.
Yeah. Because good deep dive episode.
Yeah, exactly. One thing I did want to ask you though, which will be quick, hopefully, is have you, like I did with creatine, is there anything that you have changed your mind on, or you have more nuance since we recorded? Because I think our first podcast was 2 years ago.
Wow. Yeah. I have gotten more people complaining about either getting pumped or cramping. And so I still recommend it, just like you do. I still say you should try it, because I think that most people that is not an issue with, because I assume, like, you know, a handful of people have written me in about those complaints. And I assume many more than a handful have read what I've written or listened to the podcast and started supplementing with it, and just aren't going to write me and let me know, like, one way or the other what happened. But probably it was either like they didn't notice anything, or it was only beneficial. So I still recommend it. I think that the benefits, when it does work for you and it doesn't interfere with what's going on, are way larger than the downside of, you know, getting pumped. Because you get pumped and you're like, okay, and you determine that creatine is, you know, definitely for you, making you pump out faster. Then sure, like, you take it out of your diet and you've wasted, you know, a couple of weeks of your climbing career, and you never have to worry about it again. But on the other hand, like, you just assume that you're going to get pumped from it and you never try it. Maybe you're not taking advantage of, you know, one of the most potent ergogenic aids that we know of. So give it a try. It's cheap, it's safe, it's easy to supplement with. And maybe there will be a downside for you, but chances are there won't, and you won't know unless you try.
So is that's the only thing really that you've kind of changed your mind on?
Are you thinking of something specific?
No, that's what I'm just saying. Like, I'm not fishing for anything. I'm just
I think that's the main thing. Like, collagen as well. Like, I'm a little bit more open to the idea of it, but again, like I discussed in the episode we just recorded, it's a little bit more that I'm intrigued by the concept of, like, protein or nutrition immediately prior to a low rep or high rep, low intensity session, and not as much about the collagen. But I keep my eyes open, and I'd love to be proved wrong.
Yeah, no, same. The only other one I can think of was, I think I need to go back and listen to it, but I think we were very hard on cardio for climbers on that one episode. And I can't remember why. I need to go back, but I had this niggling thing that we came across saying, just don't do cardio at all because it's bad. But I don't think that was the case. But
I don't think we said definitely don't do it at all. I think we probably, if I was recording the episode today, I'd say, like, it's probably not going to have a huge benefit, but it's also not going to hurt necessarily.
Yeah, I think what I would have done is just maybe spoken a little bit more about just aerobic base. Yeah, just having a good aerobic base through whatever running, cycling, and things like that could be beneficial in terms of that. But we probably said that. But that's the only thing I can think of. But other than that, I think that's what has been encouraging, and also is what I've said to people is that what Brian and I talk about is really very little opinion. Apart from some of the application, because it's what we've learned from working with real people. But, like, what has been a joy is that I'm not a smart person. I never went to university. I read a few textbooks, listened to a lot of stuff. And what I tell people on this podcast over the last 2 years has literally been from the textbooks and from the people. And any of the nuance has been the discussion that has been had from the people who are researching it with other very smart people. So, at the end of the day, I'm not surprised why there hasn't been I haven't seen any pushback really on anything that we've said, is because we're really not saying it. We're saying what the body of literature has said.
Exactly. And it's a body of literature. There's not usually, like, with what we're talking about, like some of the things, like the supplements that have only like a handful of studies, you're going to see bigger fluctuations in, like, whether it's effective or not. But, like, when we're talking about protein or even creatine, like, it's going to take a lot of new research to change our opinion substantially. because it's already a large pool of research, and how much water do you have to add to change the level of that? You have to add a lot. So
yeah, and I just encourage people, who are trying to make decisions on things, is that the great thing now is that the research is very easily found, and it's really not difficult to actually find what is the general understanding or the answer to a lot of your questions if you search for it. I hope, I know I've got emails from people who said they had never thought about nutrition in this way, or they weren't really science fans and things like that. And our podcast has actually made them interested in this. And, that's ultimately how I got involved with this, was just listening to podcasts from people and thinking, wow, I'd like to understand more. Yeah. So, good for you. And I'm really pleased that we put this resource out there, and that it's been helpful to people. So thank you so much for listening. If you did in one big go for 4 hours, I hope the drive was safe and you got to where you were going.
Yeah, hopefully you're going to some crag, and it was a road trip, and you just had a wonderful time sitting in the car with your friends. Yeah, and our voices.
Have you got any trips coming up, or are you just still studying?
I get so few breaks that I don't have anything specific planned. Maybe something late April, but nothing set in stone. How about you?
Yeah, I don't have anything. No, I mean, all my stuff that I'm doing is all totally unclimbing related, really. I have, so I'm still doing my pole dance stuff. I had to take a break for a while, but I'm still doing it.
Nice.
You can't see it because of the split screen. You're actually missing.
Oh my goodness! Look at that.
I have a pole in my room.
Wow.
Which depending on the person is either awful or sexy. I don't really know, but I don't care.
Yeah, doesn't matter. Hopefully it's sexy with the right people and awful with the right people.
Yeah, it certainly hasn't brought up. But other than that, I don't think there's anything much more. But most of my stuff is on Instagram, Useful Coach. If you're listening to this and it's in February, and I'm allowed to do this because it's my podcast. My coaching slots are available. My next available slots are from June. So if you want to work with me, then from June onwards, there's slots available. And the way I do it is you just basically pay a small deposit to book a spot, and then that guarantees that we'll start in that point, and then we go forward. I've got a couple of interviews I've had with people on other podcasts about stuff. It's the Useful Coach is trying to be useful and not burn himself out.
Help Tom support all of this. Help him get beyond a $250 budget per month or £250 budget. Exactly.
And a big
toothpaste.
A big thank you to, I think we've had about 50 pounds worth of donations in the last 2 years for ClimbSci. So really thank you to those people who we should have actually put the names out, but thank you to those people who have sent £10 here and there. It's just paid for things like the SoundCloud subscription and bits like that.
Exactly.
So thanks for that. I really appreciate that. If you go to ClimbSci.com, there is actually at the top it says thank you. So feel free to give us money if you would like to. That really, I'm not going to be shy about that. That helps. Yes, catch Brian on climbingnutrition.com. He's still active there. He's still, every now and then he puts an article out and I'm like, oh, wow, he's still writing articles.
I still am. Yeah, I'm trying to write more.
Good.
Trying to do more than I really slowed down last year, but hoping to pick the pace back up. I got some new topics that I'm interested in putting out there. So
fantastic.
So yeah, stay open and or stay tuned to it, and you should see some more activity.
Definitely. Brian, thank you so much as always. Always good catching up with you. And it's it's the fact that we can speak for 4 hours together is a sign that there's a mutual, there's a joining.
It's
like,
true.
There's like Avengers.
Yeah, exactly. Just wait for part 2.
Exactly. Well, the end game or whatever it's called.
Yeah.
Good. I'm going to go to sleep.
Yeah, you need to get yourself to bed. Turn that
That's going to be horrible.
that bright lamp off.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Let's see what happens if I do this. I still have the other one on the other side. So
Oh man, you got 2 in there?
I've got this is a little one, like a wake-up light, but
it's like a totally different ambiance. Now it doesn't look like daylight. Now it's like almost like
this is dusk. Man, my eyes look tired. Anyway, I'm waffling. Let's say goodbye. Thank you everyone for listening. And we'll speak to you soon when we speak to you. All right. Thanks.
All right. Bye.